Likutey Halakhot on Shulchan Aruch Yoreh De'ah. Rebbe Noson, follower of Rebbe Nachman of Breslov. Laws of Meat and Milk. Law 1. Based on the lesson in Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 19, that is mentioned earlier in Laws of Ritual Slaughter, Law 2. Section 1. This corresponds to meat and milk, which is a very severe prohibition. Even just cooking them together is forbidden by the Torah. This is because the main nourishment of the all-encompassing evil, which is the serpent, comes through the Aramaic Targum, through which evil ascends to draw nourishment from holiness, as stated in the lesson. Milk corresponds to the Targum, as mentioned earlier in Laws of Things Coming from a Living Creature, Law 1. For it is transformed into blood, as in, blood disintegrates and is transformed into milk, Bechorot 6b. This corresponds to Noga, which corresponds to Targum, which corresponds to the tree of knowledge, which is sometimes evil, which corresponds to blood, and sometimes is transformed into good. The blood is transformed into milk. That is why milk, which corresponds to holiness and good, to the wholeness of the holy tongue that has become whole through the Targum, as in, honey and milk beneath your tongue, Song of Songs 4:11, therefore does not require to be rendered kosher for eating through slaughter. And though milk corresponds to the holiness of the holy tongue, nevertheless, a bit of dregs still remains in it, since it has still not been completely sorted out. That is why milk is constantly sorting itself out again and again, as we see that one cannot leave it out for a while without its immediately beginning to separate out the fat that is in it, which is the best part of it, which floats to the top. Eventually, this milk will naturally produce butter and then cheese, and then other things from what still remains, such as whey cheeses. This is because the very essence of milk comes from its having been sorted out from evil to good, from blood to milk, and as known, anything that has been sorted out and rectified from evil to good, even though it has already come into the category of good, still requires more sorting out again and again, in order to fully sort out all of the choicest good, while what remains will be sorted out afterward. Etz Chaim 39:3. This corresponds to the butter that is the choicest part that is sorted out first, and then what is left behind will produce cheese, and after that, whey cheese will be sorted out until what is left is only the pure dregs that remain from the initial transformation from blood to milk. This is the way that had until now been hidden within the milk, but now is being sorted out from the milk as the quintessence of the dregs. That is why there is one opinion that these byproducts are indeed forbidden as coming from a living creature, Yoreh De'ah 81. The permissibility of milk without slaughter is because milk corresponds to the holiness of the holy tongue that has been transformed from evil to good through the Targum, despite there still being some remainders in it that have still not been sorted out, the dregs of the way that were hidden within it nevertheless. Their effects were neutralized, since they were only a minority, and most of it, and in fact its essence, was good, which is why it does not require slaughter. But now that it has been sorted out repeatedly, such that only the essential dregs of the way are left, the original prohibition without slaughter reverts to being in effect, since the dregs of whey themselves are unrectified waste. This is why the high priest was guarded on the day before Yom Kippur, to prevent him from eating dairy, so that he would not have an emission that would disqualify him from the service. Dairy warms the body and elicits sleep, as written regarding Sisera. He requested water, but she gave him milk. Judges 5:25. This is because milk corresponds to Targum, to Noga, to sleep and slumber, and although it has already entered into the category of good, nevertheless, since its very essence comes from a transformation from evil to good, and some evil still remains that bit of dregs that is hidden in it, therefore, the serpent is still attached to it, and is able to draw nourishment from the holiness. Thus, since milk warms the body and brings on slumber, it can cause an emission. Section 2. So, this is the prohibition of meat and milk, to avoid giving nourishment to the meat, which corresponds to judgments, to which the forces of evil are attached to prevent the goat from drawing nourishment from holiness through its mother's milk, as can be understood from the Holy Zohar Part 2, 125a. This is because meat is the essence of the denseness and materiality of the body, which corresponds to judgments to a firm body, Bava Batra. 10a, to which the all-encompassing evil is attached, which corresponds to the realm of evil that is most attached to animals. That is why, even after slaughter, there still remains some attachment to it, for as known, great toil is required rectification after rectification to separate the evil from the good to which the evil was so firmly attached. Hence, there is nothing that requires as much cooking as meat, especially animal meat, which is very dense, as in a firm body. That is why meat requires so much preparation and is not ready to eat until after lengthy cooking over a fire, and without cooking is totally not fit for human consumption, since it has not yet been sorted out, and the evil parts of it have still not been completely subdued and ameliorated until after the cooking over a fire, as in, they came from fire, and fire will consume them. Ezekiel 15:7. In fact, cooking of all things that require cooking is the same in order to ameliorate, sort out, and prepare them for human consumption through the cooking over a fire. That is why meat, and especially animal meat, anything that embodies a living spirit to which the forces of evil are very attached, require lengthy cooking in order to ameliorate them. This is why our sages said that living flesh should be given to a dog, specifically a dog, as in, cast it to the dog, Exodus 22:30. For the all-encompassing evil has still not been ameliorated, which corresponds to a blemishing in the covenant, which corresponds to a dog descends. This then is the prohibition of meat and milk, to withhold the empowerment and nourishment that the all-encompassing evil attached to the flesh would derive from the milk, that it not be able to draw nourishment from holiness through the milk, which corresponds to Targum, from which it seeks to be nourished. That is why the main prohibition is only if cooked together, but the cooking itself is also forbidden, for the binding of things is mainly through cooking, as the Rebbe cites elsewhere, Likutey Moharan, Part 1. 2. Regarding baking and cooking corresponding to the preparation for conjugal union. For cooking prepares, ameliorates, and makes food fitting for eating, which corresponds to conjugal union. Hence, this prohibition is very severe, for combining meat and milk would, on the contrary, bring about a very bad union by providing nourishment to the forces of evil through the milk. Section 3. That is why it is not forbidden to cook meat in whey, although the sages forbade eating this mixture Yoreh De'ah. 87. For the whey is the essence of the dregs that have been separated and sorted out from the good, with no holiness remaining in it, such that one opinion says that it returns to its original prohibition, as said earlier. Hence, the prohibition of meat and milk obviously does not apply here, for there is no way for the meat to draw nourishment from holiness through it, since holiness has already been separated from it. Section 4. This is the meaning of what is stated in the Holy Zohar, that the prohibition of meat and milk corresponds to the first fruit, as the verse in fact juxtaposes them. Bring the first fruits of your land. Do not cook a kid goat in its mother's milk. Exodus 23:19 and 34. 26. So as to subdue Lavan. As the verse says in the section of first fruits, an Aramean seeks to destroy my ancestor, Deuteronomy 26:5. This is as said, we must not provide nourishment to the all-encompassing evil through the Targum, which corresponds to milk, which corresponds to Lavan the Aramean, who constantly seeks to draw nourishment from holiness through the Targum, as in, an Aramean seeks to destroy my ancestor, Lavan, who said in Aramaic, Yegar Sahaduta, Genesis 31:47. Study this in the lesson. Hence, the main severity of the prohibition of meat and milk is in animal meat, for the all-encompassing evil is most attached to animals' laws of ritual slaughter. Law 2 and the bad bloods are mostly found in animals, which is why they require slaughter, but the blood does not need to be covered, for there is no good in it at all. So the prohibition of cooking animal meat and milk together is very severe, so as not to provide nourishment for the evil. However, evil is less attached to beasts and birds, so therefore their blood must be covered after ritual slaughter, and their meat is not as distant from milk, which is why essentially one may cook and eat them with milk, especially birds, which are very close to the category of milk. Since birds correspond to the world of formation, as mentioned in Laws of Meat that has been left unwatched, Law 2, which corresponds to Targum, which is the source of milk, as said earlier. That is why a bird requires a lesser ritual slaughter, slitting only one vital sign, and why it may be cooked with milk. And though the sages forbade this, there are nevertheless several leniencies regarding birds, even more than regarding beasts, which are also only forbidden with milk by rabbinical decree Yoreh De'ah 89. 2 for birds are much closer to milk, which corresponds to Targum. Nevertheless, since a bird must be minimally slaughtered, the sages forbade eating it with milk, for milk is even closer to holiness and requires no slaughter at all. For even in the Targum itself, there are many different levels. Thus, fish that require no slaughter at all and whose blood is not prohibited at all can be eaten with milk without any prohibition at all, for evil has no attachment to fish at all. Section 5. Hence, the prohibition of meat and milk is connected with ritual slaughter. Whatever requires slaughter, and the slaughter of which is more extensive, the prohibition of that meat and milk is more extensive. This explains what is stated in the Holy Zohar. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said that we must abstain from eating bird meat with milk, just as an abstinent from wine should avoid coming near to a vineyard. Since a bird requires ritual slaughter, Zohar Part 2, 125b, for the very essence of the prohibition, is connected with the requirement for ritual slaughter. And our sages went even further and prohibited eating milk even separately after meat, designating a minimum time frame between them of finishing the meal and reciting the blessing after meals. Yoreh De'ah 89. For the food requires more sorting out within the body, even after eating. Laws of the blessings over fragrance. Law 1. For which reason we must recite a blessing after eating all foods. And because it still needs sorting out, our sages therefore forbade eating milk after meat to prevent the evil from drawing nourishment from the good. Hence, the prohibition is connected with having finished eating and recited the after blessing. For after one has finished eating and recited the blessing, the food has already been sorted out by taking one's mind off of the food and reciting the after blessing, so the prohibition of meat and milk is no longer relevant. Section 6. Salt requires cooking just as beef. Shabbat 42b. This means that in order for food to be softened by salt, for salt softens all things for eating, as in an eternal covenant of salt. Numbers 18. 19. For the amelioration of foods is dependent upon the rectification of the covenant. Therefore, lengthy cooking is required, just like beef, which requires lengthy cooking in order to rectify it with the rectification of the covenant. Law 2. Bring the first fruits of your land to God's temple. Do not cook a goat in its mother's milk. Exodus 23:19. Do not cook a goat in its mother's milk is stated 3 times in the Torah, once to forbid eating, once to forbid benefiting from it in other ways, and once to forbid the very cooking, referring to eating and benefiting as cooking, to teach us that the prohibition is only when they have been cooked together, though our sages forbade even when they were not cooked together. A goat is not exclusive, and the same applies to oxen and sheep, and there is also no difference between its own mother's milk or another's milk, for the verse is only speaking in a common case. Yoreh De'ah 87. The Rebbe writes in Likutey Halakhot, Part 2, 67, that there are luminaries of light and luminaries of fire that oppose each other, and when the luminaries of light intensify, the luminaries of fire are subdued, and if the luminaries of light disappear, the luminaries of fire then intensify. This corresponds to Rachel is weeping over her children, Jeremiah 31:14, which represents sight disappearing after weeping, which is the disappearing of the luminaries of light, corresponding to the setting of the light in the west, which corresponds to the destruction of the temple, as in, He sent a fire from on high, Lamentations 1:13. This corresponds to the hiddenness of the tzaddik, the departing and disappearance of the tzaddik, who corresponds to splendor, to the totality of colors, the three colors of the eye, and the pupil from whom all of the four fundamental elements arise, and through whom the evil aspects of the four fundamental elements, which are the totality of negative traits, are subdued. This corresponds to the four letters of God's name, from which arise the four minds, which are the three colors of the eye and the pupil that flow to the tzaddik, foundation of the world, Proverbs 10:25, from which the four fundamental elements arise, all of which corresponds to the luminaries of light. This corresponds to Shabbat, which is also the three colors of the eye and the pupil, which shines into the temple. Study there the entire lesson from beginning to end. Section 1. This corresponds to the prohibition of meat and milk. Meat corresponds to the luminaries of fire. The definitive advantage of human over animal is intelligence and the mind. Since an animal has no intelligence, and intelligence corresponds to the luminaries of light, which corresponds to the four minds, as said. So, since an animal has no intelligence, its vitality, therefore, does not come from the luminaries of light, so it must be the luminaries of fire, for it must be one or the other. And wherever there are no luminaries of light, the luminaries of fire, which correspond to the realm of evil, are dominant. That is why the verse says, "In the evening eat meat." Exodus 16:12. Evening corresponds to the luminaries of fire, as written, "In the evening there will be an appearance of fire," and Numbers 9:15. For the evening is when the light sets in the west, which corresponds to the disappearance of the luminaries of light. So the evening is the time to eat meat, which corresponds to the luminaries of fire. This is also why meat must be eaten with great holiness and devotion, so that one is able to subdue the luminaries of fire. So, after the Israelites sinned by lusting meat, the luminaries of fire were intensified. As written, "A fire of God burnt in them, and the riffraff among them lusted. Who will give us meat to eat?" There, 11:3. For this reason, an ignorant person should not eat meat. Pesachim 49b. For one can only eat meat through the power of the tzaddik, who corresponds to the luminaries of light, through whom we are able to subdue the luminaries of fire and to sort the good out of the bad, and only then are we able to eat meat. For in fact, even the luminaries of fire draw nourishment from the luminaries of light, which are the three colors of the eye and the pupil that arise from the four letters of God's name. For even the luminaries of fire contain the four colors, since fire contains four colors, as stated in the Holy Zohar Part 1, 51a, which correspond to the four letters of God's name. This is because even to the luminaries of fire devolves vitality from God's name, since God sustains all things, only that we must not give them more vitality than they need for their bare sustenance, so that they will not intensify. That is why, through the power of the tzaddik, who corresponds to the luminaries of light, we are able to eat meat, for through him we have the power to subdue the luminaries of fire and sort the good out of them. elevating it to holiness, and by elevating this good that is in them, which corresponds to the luminaries of light, for they too are nourished from the luminaries of light, we thereby make the holy intelligence and mind more complete. That is why one who is able to have the intention in eating meat to do so with proper holiness and purity is able to thereby make intelligence more complete, which corresponds to the luminaries of light, by elevating the luminaries of light from within the luminaries of fire that were embodied in the animal flesh. This explains the sages in the Talmud who did not respond to a question because they had not eaten meat bava kama. 71b through 71a. For through eating meat, one reaches complete intelligence. But it is impossible to subdue the luminaries of fire and elevate the good from them, through which one is able to eat meat, other than through the power of the tzaddik and the Torah. The tzaddik corresponds to the luminaries of light, as said, and so does the Torah, as in Bereshit, the 3 colors of the eye, and the pupil Tikkuni Zohar, number 4, paragraph 15b, cited by the Rebbe in Likutey Moharan, part 113. Hence, specifically through them is it possible to subdue the luminaries of fire and be able to eat meat. This is why one ignorant of Torah must not eat meat, for one ignorant of Torah is one who is not close to the authentic tzaddikim, as our sages said. Even one who has studied scripture and Mishnah but has not been in the proximity of Torah scholars is considered ignorant of Torah. Brachot 47b. So this person must not eat meat, for they lack the power to subdue the luminaries of fire, since they are not close to the authentic tzaddikim who correspond to the luminaries of light. So if they would eat meat, the luminaries of fire that correspond to animal flesh would be empowered. This explains why eating meat became permissible only during Noah's times. Sanhedrin 59b for Noah was the tzaddik of the generation, specifically through whom it becomes permissible to eat meat, for we can only eat meat through the power of the tzaddik who corresponds to Noah. And this permission comes about through sacrificial offerings, as Noah brought offerings from all of the kosher species, after which he was told that meat may be eaten, as written, I have given you everything as the greens of the field. Genesis 9:3. For through the offerings is the spirit of animality, which corresponds to luminaries of fire, subdued. Section 2. This corresponds to the fire on the altar that consumed the offerings. The fire on the altar corresponds to holy fire, which corresponds to a consuming fire. Deuteronomy 4:24. 9. 3. The fire that consumes, the luminaries of fire that correspond to the spirit of animality, which corresponds to offerings. That animal, which corresponds to luminaries of fire, as said, is burnt by the fire from on high, as in a fire that consumes fire, Pesikta Rabati 11, and Yalkut Shimoni. Deuteronomy 33. Number 5, 51. 4. They came from the fire, and the fire will consume them. Ezekiel 15. 7. Since the handle of the axe to chop down the forest is made of wood. Sanhedrin 39b. Hence, the luminaries of fire are subdued by the sacrificial offerings, which is why the meat of the offering becomes thereby permissible to eat, since through the offering we have the power to eat meat. For by subduing the evil that corresponds to the luminaries of fire through the offerings, we are able to sort out the good from them. That is why the Torah had to explicitly permit eating meat other than that of the offerings, for we would otherwise have thought that we cannot eat meat at all, other than through an offering, through which the luminaries of fire are subdued, without which, how can we eat meat, which corresponds to luminaries of fire? So the Torah had to explicitly permit it, since once there are sacrificial offerings in the world, we are thereby able to eat meat in any case, even if part of the animal was not offered as a sacrifice. For through the power of the offerings brought in the temple, the luminaries of fire are subdued, through which we have the power to eat meat anywhere, even without an offering. For the luminaries of fire, the spirit of animality, have already been subdued, and we have the power to sort out the good of the meat from the evil, since there are sacrificial offerings. These offerings are brought in the temple, for all private sacrifices were forbidden from the day that the temple was chosen Zevachim, 112b. And since the luminaries of light shine in the temple, we are therefore able to subdue in it the luminaries of fire. Thus, ever since the temple was destroyed, we should rightly abstain from eating meat, Bava Batra, 60b, for we should only be able to eat meat as long as the temple exists and offerings are brought. Yet, we still eat meat. Society could not endure such abstention, as our sages said there, since, nevertheless, even today, we still have the power to subdue the luminaries of fire through the power of the tzaddikim and the Torah. Furthermore, even today we have offerings, for whoever studies the laws of offerings is as if they brought an offering, Menachot, 110a. So, from the beginning of the month of Av until after the fast of the 9th of Av, we refrain from eating meat, for we are now mourning over the destruction of the temple. And refraining from eating meat shows that eating meat should essentially be only while the temple is standing and offerings are brought. Section 3. Hence, meat corresponds to luminaries of fire, and this corresponds to the prohibition of meat and milk. Milk corresponds to luminaries of light, for blood disintegrates and is transformed into milk, Bechorot, 6b, which corresponds to the subdual of the luminaries of fire that are refined in the luminaries of light. The turbidity of blood corresponds to luminaries of fire, since blood is hot and boiling literally like fire. So when the turbidity of blood intensifies, this elicits tears, for tears come from the wastes of the turbidity of blood. See Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 36, 51. And since tears correspond to the departing of the luminaries of light and the intensification of the luminaries of fire, as in, Rachel is weeping over her children, therefore the turbidity of blood corresponds to luminaries of fire, which correspond to tears. But when the blood disintegrates and is transformed into milk, then the luminaries of fire, corresponding to tears, are ameliorated, and luminaries of light intensify, corresponding to milk, as in, his eyes are like doves, bathing in milk. Song of Songs, 5:12, for milk corresponds to the light of the eyes, which corresponds to luminaries of light. This process of blood disintegrating and transforming into milk takes place mainly at birth. All births correspond to the manifestation of the light of the tzaddik, for the entire world was only created for him, to provide him with company, Brachot, 6b. So, therefore, all creatures were created only for the tzaddik. That is why when there is a birth which is a new creature, the light of the tzaddik is being manifested. For everything comes about through the tzaddik, who sustains all things. Hence, when there is a birth, blood disintegrates and is transformed into milk, for now the manifestation of the light of the tzaddik, which corresponds to luminaries of light, is shining. The birth corresponds to the manifestation of the light of the tzaddik, who is the foundation of the world, through whom all births in the world come about. So therefore, blood now disintegrates and is transformed into milk, meaning that the boiling of the blood, which corresponds to luminaries of fire, is ameliorated, and this produces milk, which corresponds to luminaries of light. This is why milk may be consumed without ritual slaughter. The slaughter is in order to subdue the spirit of animality, which corresponds to luminaries of fire that are subdued by the knife of the slaughter, which corresponds to a fire that consumes fire, as in, my sword will consume flesh. Deuteronomy 32:42, for the sword corresponds to fire. As written, God metes out justice with fire, and all flesh with his sword. Isaiah 66:16. Thus, through the knife of ritual slaughter, which corresponds to a consuming fire, the luminaries of fire, that correspond to the spirit of animality, are subdued. For They emerge from fire, and fire will consume them. That is why the milk that corresponds to luminaries of light may be consumed while the animal is still alive and without ritual slaughter. This is why the land of Israel was praised as being a land flowing with milk and honey. Exodus 3:8. The land of Israel corresponds to luminaries of light. For the luminaries of light shine into it. As written, God's eyes are constantly upon it. Deuteronomy 11:12. And the light of the eyes corresponds to luminaries of light. For the temple, which corresponds to luminaries of light, is in the land of Israel, which is why milk flows forth from there. As written, a land flowing with milk. Section 4. Thus, the Torah forbade mixing meat and milk, so that the luminaries of fire would not draw too much nourishment from the luminaries of light. Each one on its own may be eaten, for we are able to sort out and eat each one by itself, even meat. But when the meat is mixed with milk, then it draws too much nourishment from the luminaries of light, allowing for the luminaries of fire to intensify, causing the mixture to become completely forbidden. This is because when the realm of evil, the luminaries of fire, draws too much nourishment from the luminaries of light, they are empowered, and we are then unable to sort them out. So, the Torah forbade specifically cooking them together, and even the prohibition of eating or deriving other pleasure from them is also expressed as cooking, for the essence of the prohibition is cooking them over fire, which is an intensification of the luminaries of fire. When meat is mixed with milk through cooking, that is, while they are being cooked over fire, the luminaries of fire are intensified because the meat, which corresponds to luminaries of fire, is being nourished from the milk, which corresponds to luminaries of light. That is why even just cooking them together is forbidden, so that the luminaries of fire are not intensified. This explains the three prohibitions regarding meat and milk. Shabbat corresponds to luminaries of light, and at the culmination of the holy Shabbat day and the onset of the weekdays, during which the luminaries of fire wield sway, we recite the Havdalah to differentiate between the holy and the mundane in order to sort out good from the evil, which is our main task throughout the 6 weekdays, sorting out the good from the evil, subduing the luminaries of fire that wield sway during the weekdays, sorting the good out of them. On Shabbat, they wield no sway, as written, "You shall not kindle a fire throughout your dwellings on the day of Shabbat." Exodus 35:3. And their power is only during the 6 weekdays. So we therefore differentiate and sort the good out of them. So we recite a blessing over fire. Who creates the luminaries of fire? Immediately upon the end of Shabbat, thereby declaring that God created everything. And even the luminaries of fire receive vitality from him, as written, "You sustain all things." Nehemiah 9:6. And by declaring at this time through the recital of the Havdalah that differentiates between holy and mundane, that everything is from God, and that he created even the luminaries of fire, they are thereby subdued. For that itself is their subdual, when God's holiness is manifested, that everything is from him. So the Havdalah is recited at this time, for now we have the power to separate between holy and mundane, and to sort out the good from them. Now, the 6 weekdays that correspond to the 6 orders of the Mishnah, which contain the forbidden and the permissible, the kosher and the non-kosher, the defiled and the pure, which is the essence of sorting out the good from the evil, which is the permissible from the prohibited, the kosher from the non-kosher, the defiled from the pure, are 6 categories. 3 categories of good, the kosher, the permissible, and the pure, and 3 of evil, the non-kosher, the forbidden, and the defiled. But when meat and milk are mixed, good becomes mixed with evil, and then all of these 3 categories become mixed, corresponding to which are the 3 prohibitions of meat and milk, as can be understood from the Holy Zohar, that through the mixing of meat and milk, good becomes very mixed with evil. This is the meaning of what is stated in the Zohar that mixing meat and milk corresponds to a blemishing of the covenant. Whoever does not guard the first drop has mixed meat with milk. Tikkuni Zohar 14:30a. This is because a blemishing of the covenant is an intensification of the luminaries of fire. For this lust corresponds to the heat of fire, which is intensified through the heat of the blood, which is hot as fire. And on account of the blemish of this lust, the luminaries of light that come from the tzaddik, foundation of the world, depart. For a tzaddik is one who guards the holy covenant Zohar, Part 1, 59b. Thus, when there is a blemishing of the covenant, the illumination of the tzaddik, the foundation of the world, who corresponds to the guarding of the covenant, cannot shine, and then the luminaries of light depart and the luminaries of fire are intensified. This corresponds to the mixing of meat and milk, which is when the luminaries of fire draw too much nourishment from the luminaries of light, on account of which they intensify, which is a blemishing of the covenant. For the essence of the blemishing of the covenant is that the drops of the mind, which correspond to luminaries of light, are brought to a place that corresponds to luminaries of fire. Section 5. This is the first fruit of your land shall you bring to God's house. Do not cook a kid goat in its mother's milk. The first fruit of your land corresponds to luminaries of light, which correspond to the mind, which is called the first Likutey Moharan, Part 135. These fruits must be brought to God's house as the head of the house, explained in the lesson, meaning that the head must shine into the house, which sustains the temple. Thus, the first, bring to God's house, meaning that the head should shine into the temple, which corresponds to luminaries of light. Thus, do not cook a kid goat, meaning that one should not mix meat with milk, for that would, on the contrary, cause the intensification of the luminaries of fire. This explains the juxtaposition. Section 6. This is why the Torah speaks of a kid goat in its mother's milk, even though the prohibition is in fact any animal, and not only in its own mother's milk. Yoreh De'ah 87. This alludes to the blemish that is caused by mixing meat with milk. A kid goat corresponds to Esau, a hairy man, a goat man, Genesis 27. 11. For Esau is filled with blood, corresponding to luminaries of fire that correspond to blood. This is when Isaac became old, his eyes dimmed from seeing, he called to Esau, his elder son, when the luminaries of light depart, as in, his eyes dimmed, then he called to Esau. For then Esau, corresponding to luminaries of fire, is empowered. Rebekah heard this, as written. Rebekah was listening there. Verse 5. Specifically, Rebekah, who corresponds to a God-fearing woman. To Rachel, as I heard from the Rebbe, that the Shekhinah was called Sarah during Abraham's times, Rebekah during Isaac's times, and Rachel and Leah during Jacob's times, meaning that all of the matriarchs represent the same thing. Thus, Rebekah corresponds to the pupil, which corresponds to Rachel, upon whom the rectification and blemish are dependent, for when the luminaries of light shine, then her eyes shine through the three colors of the eye and the pupil, and if not, then Rachel weeps over her children. So, specifically Rebekah heard, when Isaac was talking to his son Esau, she heard that the luminaries of fire, corresponding to Esau, are beginning to become aroused, which was relevant to her, as said. Rebekah then called her son Jacob and told him, "Go, and bring me from there 2 kid goats," specifically kid goats, for the handle of the axe to chop down the forest is made of wood, since a kid goat corresponds to the great power of the realm of evil, as in Esau, the goat man. Thus, specifically through slaughtering the goat, is Esau, the goat man, corresponding to the luminaries of fire, subdued, since one of these 2 goats was made into a sacrificial offering, as Rashi says on the verse, and the luminaries of fire are subdued by offerings. As said above, this is why most sign offerings are brought from goats, including those brought on the festivals and on the new moons. This is because when one sins, the luminaries of fire, the cause of all sins, are intensified. So the rectification comes through a goat, which corresponds to the intense power of the realm of evil. One brings a goat, slaughters it, and offers it up on the fire on the altar, through which the luminaries of fire are subdued, thus extracting and elevating the holiness that had been swallowed. And the goat is brought on the new moon to rectify the moon that had been diminished, which corresponds to the departing of the luminaries of light, from which the luminaries of fire draw their nourishment, which is rectified by the offering of a goat. So Rebekah instructed Jacob to bring goat offerings to subdue the luminaries of fire, corresponding to Esau, and to prepare them as delicacies, that is, to subdue their evil and sort out their good, from which to make the delicacies. Through this, Jacob received the blessings, which are the bounty of the tzaddik, foundation of the world, as written, blessings to the head of the tzaddik, Proverbs 10:6, which corresponds to the luminaries of light, which correspond to the tzaddik, foundation of the world. Esau thus said, "He took my birthrights, and now he has taken my blessing." For the birthrights correspond to luminaries of light, to Joseph the tzaddik, who was called the firstborn of his oxen, Deuteronomy 33:17. For the firstborn is the first, which corresponds to the mind, which corresponds to luminaries of light, as said earlier. That is why Jacob sought to take Esau's birthrights, to extract from Esau, who corresponds to luminaries of fire, the nourishment he had drawn from the luminaries of light, which is the firstborn rights. This is why Esau raised his voice and wept, in order to intensify the luminaries of fire, which correspond to tears, as said above. Hence, a goat alludes to Esau, who corresponds to luminaries of fire, and this is, do not cook a kid goat in its mother's milk, so as not to nourish the kid goat which corresponds to Esau the goat man from the mother's milk, that is, from luminaries of light, which correspond to mother's milk, which shine into Rachel, who is beautiful and good-looking, and is the mother of children. For when meat is mixed with milk, then the goat, which corresponds to luminaries of fire, draws nourishment from luminaries of light, which correspond to mother's milk. The Shulchan Aruch thus states, a goat is not exclusive, and there is no difference between the mother's milk and another's milk, and the verse is only speaking about Hova, a common case. Yoreh De'ah 87:2. Everyone finds this peculiar. Is it common to cook a goat in its mother's milk? Indeed, how can one say that doing so is common and usual? But based upon what was said, Hove is used here in the sense of causation, speaking about what is caused by this blemish of mixing meat and milk. Indeed, the blemish caused by mixing any meat and milk is that the goat draws nourishment from mother's milk. In other words, when meat is mixed with milk, no matter what type meat, in whatever type of milk what is caused, is this blemish of the goat drawing nourishment from mother's milk, but it makes no difference. From what type of animal the meat or the milk come, it is all forbidden, but the verse is only alluding to the blemish that is caused by the mixing of meat and milk. This is why the Torah forbids only animal meat and milk, for the spirit of animality, corresponding to luminaries of fire, is mostly in animals, and, for the same reason, offerings are brought specifically from animals, in order to subdue the luminaries of fire where they are most attached to, and to elevate the good from there up to holiness. For the ultimate completion of holiness is when the good is sorted out from the depth of evil and elevated. That is why the prohibition of meat and milk is only regarding animal flesh, to which the luminaries of fire are most attached. So we must not allow them to draw nourishment from luminaries of light, and this is the prohibition of meat and milk. Furthermore, the prohibition is only in kosher animals, Yoreh De'ah 87:3, and cooking non-kosher meat in milk is not prohibited. This is because the nourishment of evil from good is accomplished through the permissible, which corresponds to noga, which is why when meat and milk are mixed, which is when the luminaries of fire are able to draw nourishment from the luminaries of light, the evil from the good. They can only draw nourishment when the meat and milk are permissible, as said. But when one of them is forbidden, they cannot draw any nourishment, and no mixing takes place, for they can only draw nourishment through the permissible. So the Torah forbade us from meat and milk, so that we are able to sort out the good, and that the luminaries of light shine into the temple, as in, bring the first fruits of your land to God's temple. Blessed be God forever. Amen and amen. Law 3. Based on the lesson in Likutey Halakhot, Part 2, 12, cited in Laws of Worms, number 3, study there well, where it is stated that each and every glory that is embodied in each and every saying has a boundary beyond which it is not allowed to spread. Study there well. Section 1. This corresponds to the prohibition of meat and milk, in that, though both are permissible, nevertheless, when meat and milk are mixed together, the result is something forbidden. All things in the world arise from the 10 sayings with which the world and everything in it were created. And since everything was created for the sake of God's glory, and each and every glory has its own boundary, therefore every object is different from any other in shape and taste, and so forth, each thing according to the boundary of the glory embodied in it. These boundaries and constrictions of each manifestation of glory embodied in each and every thing must be carefully guarded so that the boundaries are not trespassed, for outside of any boundary is the realm of the external forces of evil. Even in holiness, one must not leave the boundary of one thing and enter into that of another, for each and every glory that is embodied in each and every thing has its unique boundary according to its nature, and one must not move from one realm to another. Section 2. This corresponds to all the various prohibitions of mixing plant or animal species, as well as the prohibition of mixing meat and milk. Each thing must be guarded within its own boundary and place, for when two discrepant things that have different boundaries are mixed, then the boundary of each one of them will be trespassed. And when a boundary is trespassed, then the external forces of evil that lie outside the boundary of holiness in ambush, in anticipation of a boundary being breached, are able to draw nourishment. This corresponds to the prohibition of incestual relations. A woman is permissible to this man, but forbidden to another, which is the case in all instances of incestual relations. For all relatives, whether one's own relatives or one's wife's, are only forbidden to the one to whom they are related, but are permissible to another man, while the other man's relations are forbidden to him but are permissible to the first one. And the same with a married woman, who is permissible to her husband but forbidden to another, and the other man's wife is permissible to him but forbidden to the first one. Hence, what is permissible to one is forbidden to another, each case according to its own boundary. Now, meat and milk are antitheses. Meat comes from intense constrictions, since the main meat that is forbidden by the Torah is animal meat, and the king of animals is the ox Chagiga, 13b, which corresponds to the constriction, as in, the face of the ox was to the left side, Ezekiel 1:10, from where the constriction arises. And all boundaries of holiness come from the constrictions that come from the face of the ox was to the left side. Hence, animal meat corresponds to constriction and boundary. Milk, though, corresponds to the amelioration and expansion of constriction and boundary, as in, blood disintegrates and is transformed into milk. Bekorot 6b, for blood, corresponds to judgments and constrictions, and during birth, blood disintegrates and is transformed into milk, which corresponds to the amelioration and expansion of constriction. This takes place specifically during birth, for the truth is that although one must not breach a boundary, nevertheless, every individual must endeavor to expand the limits of holiness, so that the boundary of holiness expands and spreads greatly, for the perpetuation of the world rests essentially upon this. For God did not create the world in vain. but to be inhabited, Isaiah 45:18. This is because though leaving one's boundary is forbidden, within one's boundary, one must endeavor to stretch and expand the limits as much as possible. For the boundaries of holiness correspond to the land of Israel, which is able to expand very greatly, Ketubot 112a. Similarly, every individual has the power to ameliorate the boundary and constriction such that every boundary and limit will be stretched and expanded greatly. For God created His world with this ability to be available to every individual, as in, He stretched them as a tent to dwell, in Isaiah 40:22, upon which our sages comment, God initially created the world as two intertwined threads and uncoiled them, Chagiga 12a. The power to do this was infused into the entire creation, which is stretched and expanded through the holiness of the Jewish people who have the power to expand and enhance the boundaries of holiness so that they continually stretch and expand. This corresponds to, expand the site of your tent and let the drapes of your dwellings lean. Do not hold back. You will break out to the right and to the left. Isaiah 54:2-3. Hence, the time of birth corresponds to the expansion of the boundary of holiness, and blood disintegrates and is transformed into milk, meaning that the boundary and constriction, which correspond to blood and judgments, have been ameliorated and transformed into milk, which sustains the baby and allows it to grow. Thus, milk corresponds to the expansion of constriction. That is why meat and milk must not be mixed together, for they are the antitheses of each other. We need both meat and milk, for the constriction is what sustains the world, and without it, the world could not exist at all. That is why at the time of creation, God said to the world, "Enough," so that it not expand too much. Nevertheless, although we need the constriction, we must endeavor to ameliorate and expand the constriction so that holiness will spread and expand greatly within its boundaries in all directions, that the boundary of holiness will spread and be very stretched, which corresponds to milk. That is why these two things, meat and milk, must not be mixed together, so that neither cancels out the other, which would be the annihilation of the world, since we need specifically each one by itself, meat and milk. Section 3. This corresponds to Sukkah, after Yom Kippur, which is when the repentance of the 10 days of repentance is concluded. We then ascend to Where, which corresponds to Keter, from where forgiveness comes laws of worms, number 3, and then the world is rebuilt anew. This is because each individual, through their sins, breaks through the boundaries of holiness and descends into the external realm of the forces of evil, to the extent of their sins, and is thus distant from God's glory. For every glory has its boundary so that it does not spread outside that point. So when a person falls into that realm and then begins to search and seek for where is the place of his glory, they thereby attain the ultimate ascent up to Where, from which all forms of glory of the 10 sayings receive vitality. Through this, the world is rebuilt anew, for then God's vitality begins to spread from Where into the individual glories, such that God's glory is manifested, upon which the world is sustained. For the most important thing is that God's glory be manifested. Hence, after repentance, when one is able to manifest God's glory once again through Where, there is a much greater advantage, because now God's glory is manifested even in those external places through Where. Thus, the boundaries of holiness have become very expanded, such that all of those external places have been transformed and absorbed into holiness. For the borders and boundaries of holiness have now been constructed even there through Where. So, after the repentance of Yom Kippur, when we attain Where, and when the boundaries of holiness become very expanded, we then construct the Sukkah, which corresponds to the great expansion of the boundaries of holiness even to the outside through repentance, such that everything has been absorbed into holiness. The Sukkah alludes to this, for until now, Holiness was essentially only inside, within the house, which is the main site of holiness, as in Bereshit, the first word of the Torah, which also reads, head of the house. For the essence of holiness is only in a house, which corresponds to the boundary of holiness, because the outside is the realm of the external forces of evil. But now, after Yom Kippur, since holiness has already spread even to there through the repentance, we therefore construct a sukkah outside, to show that the boundaries of holiness have been constructed even there, as in, this too shall remain for our God. Zechariah 9:7. Furthermore, there is now less of a need to protect oneself in hiding within the walls of the house, for now the realm of evil has been subdued in its own realm. That is why we construct temporary walls. The borders of the sukkah are open on the top and on the sides, for only 2 minimum-sized walls are required, with a third wall of only a tefach, less than 10 centimeters, for we are showing that holiness has spread to all places, for God's rule is in all places. Psalms 103:22. So only temporary walls are required so that there will be some symbolic boundary, but in fact, we are now not afraid of the forces of evil at all, for now everything has come under our domain through repentance, through which all places of the external forces have been transformed into holiness. That is why Sukkot corresponds to Jacob, as in, Jacob traveled to Sukkot, Genesis 33:17, Tur, Orach Chaim, 417. For regarding Jacob it is said, you will break forth westward, eastward, northward, and southward. Genesis 28:17, corresponding to an inheritance without boundaries, which corresponds to Sukkah, where holiness spreads even to the outside, since everything has now been brought into holiness through the repentance of Yom Kippur, when we ascended up to where? Section 4. This also is alluded to elsewhere in the Rebbe's words regarding his moving into Uman, which he said corresponded to, let not a neighbor say, I have become ill. Isaiah 33:24. Chei Moharan 207, which means that when one stone, one soul that has repented and returned to God has been added, then countless houses are added. The Rebbe said at that time that through this we bring inside even the souls that had been cast outside, as in, holy stones are cast about at the corner of every street, Lamentations 4:1. For now that there has been such an increase in the number of houses, they too are in effect absorbed inside into holiness. This corresponds to Sukkah, for now the boundary of holiness has spread even to the outside, all on account of the stones, which are the souls that have been added throughout the 10 days of repentance and Yom Kippur. For through repentance, many souls, stones, have been added, such that many houses have been added outside, such that everything has been absorbed into holiness. Section 5. That is why on Sukkot we bring 70 oxen as offerings, paralleling the 70 nations. For now we are able to bring all of them inside, into holiness, through the great increase in the number of houses through the stones, to which the mitzvah of Sukkah alludes, in that the many boundaries have been added outside, as said. Thus, in the future, the nations will be tested specifically regarding the mitzvah of Sukkah, as our sages said, Avodah Zarah 3a. For through the Sukkah, we are able to bring them all into holiness, as in, he too will remain for our God. Law 4. Do not cook a kid goat in its mother's milk. Exodus 23:19, 2020. If you happen to come across a bird's nest, send away the mother and take the chicks for yourself. Deuteronomy 22:6-7. Section 1. A major principle is that every individual must constantly begin again anew, as the Rebbe urged us countless times. As explained many times throughout his holy books, and as he told that he himself only reached what he did because he constantly began again anew and never allowed himself to despair under any circumstances, sometimes even beginning again anew several times on one day. Shivchi Moharan 5-6. And our sages say the same thing on the verse, that I instruct you today, every day, they should be as new in your eyes. Deuteronomy 6:6, Sifri, and on. Today you have become a people. Every day should be for you as if today you have entered into the covenant with God. Deuteronomy 27:9, Rashi. Indeed, if one looks inside oneself well, one will see that all of the confusions, falls, and dejections are all caused by the surging of thoughts about yesterday or an hour ago. Most people see themselves as old, each one assuming that they have already grown old in their habitual ways from long ago, such that it seems impossible to change to another path. But since the individual knows that one is distant from the upright path, many therefore despair of their ever coming close to God, and even the bit of service and good deeds that they do are only done out of habit and without any arousal and vitality. All this on account of the premature agedness, seeing themselves as already too old, which is extremely harmful, as the Rebbe warned us very strongly, saying, one must never become old, not even an old chassid or an old tzaddik. Sichot Haran 51. Certainly one who has completely veered from the upright path and is living a wayward life, each individual as they know in their soul, and sees themselves as old and habituated in their inappropriate ways. For such a person is this type of agedness immeasurably harmful, for one can get completely lost if one does not arouse oneself to renewal, which is the essence of repentance, as in, return us, O God, to you, and we will return. Renew our days. Lamentations 5:21. Specifically, renew. But even those who are somewhat upright, and even tzaddikim and chasidim, if they see themselves as old and their service becomes for them habitual, this too is not good, as the Rebbe said that even an old tzaddik is not good. This is because the inclination for evil is called an old and foolish king. Ecclesiastes 4:13, for the essence of service is renewal, as in, those who wait for God will renew their strength. Isaiah 40:31, for we must renew ourselves literally every single day, as in, that I instruct you today, every day they should be as new in your eyes, which is part of the Kriyat Shema. Whoever makes the effort to constantly renew themselves will surely never fall, no matter what happens to them. For one must put completely out of mind and thought everything that has transpired yesterday or just a moment ago, for one must see oneself every single day and every single moment as if one has just now been born, as in, I have given birth to you today, Psalms 2:7, and today, if you will heed his voice, Psalms 95:7. One must maintain the thought throughout every day and every moment that one has as if been born and entered the world that very moment and wants nothing but to begin coming to know the one who created the world. And even if one has already unsuccessfully attempted thousands and myriads of times to renew oneself and come close to God, and even if one has fallen each time to wherever one has fallen, nevertheless, do not look at that at all. Forget about all that. For this day and this moment in which one is standing has never existed before in the universe, and who knows how much one can still achieve now, on this very day, in this very moment. In his goodness, God constantly renews creation every single day, and no day resembles any other day, and no moment resembles any other moment. As brought at length in the writings of the Ari about the great and countless changes that take place every single day and every single moment. Whoever contemplates the movements of the constellations and the stars, the shifting of their places and their stations, and how from minute to minute they are different, and how one born in this moment will have a different destiny from the one born in the previous moment, from which one should contemplate and understand how things are in the endless higher world. So, If you open the eyes of your intelligence and understand, you will see that the human being is unable to grasp all the details regarding which King David said, "Open my eyes, and I will behold wonders from your Torah." Psalms 119:18, and King Solomon, regarding whom it is said, "He became wiser than all other men." 1 Kings 5:11 said, "I declared that I would become wise, but it is beyond me." Ecclesiastes 7:23. And take a look at what is written in the Likutey Zohar 22. "The garment he wears in the morning, he does not wear in the evening, and the garment he wears today, he does not wear tomorrow." From which you can understand how the conditions of the worlds, which are the divine garments, are always changing from moment to moment. Etz Chaim, Heichal Adam Kadmon, Gate 1:5. And all of these countless changes throughout all the worlds is all for the purpose of bringing all human beings to God, which is the ultimate purpose for which God created all of existence. From beginning to end, all for the benefit of this lowly human being, so that he may come to know of God specifically in this world. That is why God constantly changes the way the world is conducted from moment to moment, all for the human being. God interacts with the world in each and every generation, and individually with each and every human being, every day and every moment, changing the conduct of all worlds from beginning to end every single moment, all in order to allude to each and every individual in a way that will bring them close to God from wherever they are at that specific moment. As the Rebbe writes in Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 54, God constricts himself from the infinite to the infinitesimal, alluding to each and every human being individually, according to the day and the situation, in a way that will lead them to come close to his service. Hence, what happened yesterday or just before is totally irrelevant, for the worlds and the orbs are shifting every moment, and no matter what has happened until now, nevertheless, now, one will be able to do something for God from wherever one is, for all the changes in the world are all for the human being's benefit. One must say to oneself, "The world was created for me." Sanhedrin 37a. So, every individual must have faith that every single moment of their lives they possess the power to begin again henceforth, and not be concerned at all with what happened yesterday or what may happen tomorrow, but only strengthen oneself from now on to come close to God however one can, whether in Torah study, prayer, or some mitzvah. And if one is not able to do anything at the moment, then at least one should yearn and long for God, for holy desires and longing are the most precious of all, as the Rebbe has said many times. Section 2. This corresponds to the commandment of sending away the mother bird from the nest. As explained in the Likutey Zohar, a bird's nest alludes to souls that have been banished from their places, number 6, 23a, the souls that are distant from God on account of their inappropriate actions. This, then, is the meaning of the verse. If you happen to come across a bird's nest along the way, send away the mother and take the chicks for yourself. Deuteronomy 22, 6-7. Whoever seeks to take and bring these fallen souls close to God can only do so after first making the effort to send away and separate from them their preconceived wisdom and intelligence, so that they will be as if without any intelligence at all. This is because it is impossible to come close to the authentic tzaddikim and to the Torah unless one casts aside all previously attained wisdom, as if one has no intelligence at all, as the Rebbe writes on the verse. A foolish and unwise people, translated in the Targum as a people that accepted the Torah without philosophizing. Deuteronomy 32:6, Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 123. And this is true also for anyone entering into the service of God. From one day to the next, one must put aside from one's mind all wisdom and confusions that arise from the empty wisdoms in which one was programmed from youth and which have become ingrained into one as if one had received them from Sinai. In fact, though, these ideas and wisdoms that confuse the person come only from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, from the filth that the serpent injected into Eve, who was the mother of all life, from where this filth was transmitted into every child conceived in its mother's womb, as in, "My mother conceived me in sin," Psalms 51. 7, from which come all of these confusions and foolish ideas that confuse and keep a person away from the path of life. This is, send away the mother and take the chicks for yourself. It is impossible to bring these souls close to God, souls that correspond to chicks or eggs whose wings are not yet mature, meaning that these souls still lack wings to fly in the service of God and come close to Him. The mother is hovering over the chicks or the eggs. The mother corresponds to understanding, to each individual's intelligence. For the ultimate vitality and growth of each individual is their intelligence, which sustains and guides the individual, as in, wisdom gives life, Ecclesiastes 7:12, which is why intelligence is called the mother of children. Pardes Rimonim 8:17, Etz Chaim 15:6. Hence, the mother is hovering over the chicks. If the mother of children, the mother of intelligence, which is each individual's intelligence with which the individual came into the world from their mother's womb, is hovering over the chicks, for each individual's intelligence from their mother's womb hovers over the soul to sustain and grow it. But on account of Adam's sin, the filth of the serpent has attached itself to this intelligence, from which arise all the foolish and empty ideas and wisdoms that confuse the individual. So the Torah warns us that whoever seeks to take these chicks and bring them close to God must first send away this mother, as in, send away the mother. One must send away, banish, remove from them all of the wisdoms and ideas that they already possess from the mother. Only then, take the chicks for yourself, for then one will be able to bring them close, so that they will be called one's own children, since whoever teaches another's son Torah is as if he has begotten him. Sanhedrin 19b. Indeed, it is as if one has literally begotten them, for one has removed from them the preconceived intelligence from which they have been sustained since their mother's womb, imbuing them with a new intelligence and a new vitality, as if they have literally been born today. That is why they are now called specifically children, as in, "My son, I have begotten you today." Psalms 2:7. For removing their preconceived intelligence is itself bringing them close to God, and considered as if one has begotten them today. So they are therefore called one's children, as in, "My son, I have begotten you today." Section 3. This corresponds to the prohibition of cooking or eating meat and milk together. Mother's milk corresponds to the vitality that comes from the mother's womb, which gives life to and sustains the offspring. But though it is its vitality and survival, nevertheless, the offspring must be sorted out and refined from the filth that is attached to mother's milk on account of Adam's sin. That is why we must not cook or eat meat with milk, for we must not mix them together, for each one needs to be sorted out by itself. That is why each one on its own is permissible, but together they are forbidden, for the sorting out takes place in each generation and on each and every day, appropriately for each generation, and for every day for which reason itself. When one seeks to come close to God, one must meticulously cast aside all of one's previous ideas and wisdoms. Even if one thinks that a certain idea came from a certain book, nevertheless, since it distances a person from God, one must cast it out of one's mind. For, as known, the Torah has two powers. If one is deserving, it becomes one's potion of life, but if one is not deserving, it becomes one's potion of death. Yoma 72b. That is what our sage warned about. Do not veer from what they will tell you to the right or to the left. You have only the judge of your own times. Even if he tells you that the right is left and the left is right, Deuteronomy 17:11, Sifri, Shoftim for all the worlds change from generation to generation, as well as from day to day, as said. Similarly, the sorting out of the sparks that need to be sorted out change all the time for each individual according to their level, and in line with the sorting out on every day do all beasts, birds, animals, and everything else in the world receive their vitality and sustenance. Thus, milk and meat correspond to two types of sorting out of two separate generations, which is why they must not be mixed together. As explained in Likutey Halakhot Part 1, 22, there is "we will do" and there is "we will hear," which correspond to the two crowns that the Israelites were given upon receiving the Torah, and these correspond to the manifest and the hidden, to Torah and prayer, to Father and Son. Study this well in that lesson, and at each and every level, and in each and every world, there are "we will do" and "we will hear," the manifest and the hidden, and so forth. For the hear and the hidden of each lower level is the do, and the manifest of the level above it, which itself has a level of hear, of hidden, that is above it, and so on, from level to level and from world to world. And every individual must ascend from level to level, from one level of do and hear to the next higher level of do and hear, and so on, forever. But before one can ascend from one level to a higher one must first descend before the ascent, for the descent is for the purpose of the ascent, as in, on that day, the sin of Israel will be sought but not found. Jeremiah 3:20. Through "we will do" and "we will hear," joy is brought about, as in eternal joy on their heads, Isaiah 35:10. And through joy, one attains audacity, through which we break the audacity of the realm of evil, which is the audacity of the body, and the audacity of the brazen ones of the generation who seek to obstruct others from following the paths of holiness and from coming close to the authentic tzaddikim. All this is broken by holy audacity, which corresponds to the voices that we attain through the joy that we receive through "we will do" and "we will hear," the manifest and the hidden, Torah and prayer. Study all this there very well. Also explained there is that the ultimate joy is evoked from prayer, which corresponds to awe, which corresponds to embarrassment, and through this joy, one attains holy audacity. Hence, holy audacity comes from embarrassment, as in, an embarrassed face goes to Gan Eden, Avot 5:20. Study also what is said there about the need for one to pray to God, that one know how to conduct oneself regarding audacity. For, on the one hand, audacity is very bad, since a brazen face goes to hell. There yet audacity is very necessary regarding holiness, for it is impossible to approach holiness without audacity. One must possess great audacity against the brazen ones of the generation, who seek to weaken one's resolve and to prevent one from the path of truth, and one also needs holy audacity to withstand the audacity of the body, which is brazen and strong in its lusts, regarding which the sage prayed, "May you build your city speedily in our days," there meaning that the audacity should be holy audacity, through which Jerusalem is built. Study all this there well. Section 4. This corresponds to the prohibition of meat and milk. Milk corresponds to weakness, to embarrassment, as we can see for ourselves, that milk is food for the young and does not strengthen the body, but in fact weakens it, as our sages said on the verse. He asked for water, she gave milk. Milk makes the body heavy and weak. Judges 5:25. And weakness corresponds to embarrassment, as the Talmud refers to the reaction to being embarrassed as a weakened state of mind, Tanit 24b. The Rebbe also alludes elsewhere that milk corresponds to embarrassment, when he says that embarrassment is the transformation of a red complexion to a white complexion. Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 21. 7, which is the disintegration of blood and its transformation into milk. Hence, Milk corresponds to a weakened state of mind, which corresponds to embarrassment. Meat, though, is the opposite. It corresponds to audacity, for the meat, which is the essence of the body, is the very embodiment of audacity. And in Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 22:5, the Rebbe refers to the audacious body as meat when he says one must have compassion on the meat of the body to subdue its audacity. When the audacity of the body is subdued, the essence can then come close to the meat, the soul to the body. Hence, meat corresponds to audacity, and milk corresponds to a weakened state of mind, to embarrassment, and each one by itself is permissible, but together they are forbidden. For these two traits, audacity and embarrassment, are antitheses. They are both very necessary for holiness, but one must be very cautious to use each of them in its proper place, and not in place of the opposite. Whoever inverts the appropriate use of each using audacity when embarrassment is required, or is embarrassed when audacity is required, causes great damage, and this is the greatest cause of becoming distant from God. This corresponds to the blemish caused by mixing meat with milk, though indeed both audacity and embarrassment are required for holiness, and the two are identical at their source and interdependent, as can be understood from the lesson that holy audacity arises from embarrassment. A person must indeed possess holy embarrassment, to be very embarrassed before God, so as not to transgress His will even by a hair's breadth. And by attaining this embarrassment before God not to transgress His will, one thereby strengthens one's soul with great audacity and becomes able to pray to God and attains "we will do and we will hear," which gives rise to joy, which corresponds to holy audacity, through which one is able to completely subdue the audacity of the body. Thus, holy audacity arises from holy embarrassment. But when, on the contrary, one possesses unholy embarrassment, becoming embarrassed to pray with devotion or to do some holy act in front of mockers, this person's soul is weakened and the audacity of the body is increased. Or, through the audacity of the body, by filling one's lusts, one thereby brings upon oneself disgraces and embarrassments. So one must pave one's path to acquire the traits of audacity and embarrassment to use each one in its proper place and time, and not otherwise. For instance, if some lust arises, and all the more so a forbidden one must rouse great embarrassment before God, and not transgress His will with the slightest movement, and certainly not to sin. But when one needs to pray or do some other service of God, one must then arouse great holy audacity in all ways, not only toward the mockers, so that one does not refrain from action because of those mockers, but even toward God Himself. Though one must certainly be embarrassed before God to do some mitzvah, knowing in oneself that one does not deserve to do any mitzvah or to pray before God, as the Rebbe writes in Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 72. Nevertheless, one must not remain with that sentiment, but must strengthen oneself with very great audacity and declare, "Although I am not worthy to pray before you, for who am I, that I should have the privilege to pray before you? Nevertheless, I trust in your great kindness, that you will hear the prayer of anyone, so I audaciously beg of you for all my needs." Likutey Moharan, Part 130. But whoever inverts the appropriateness of audacity and embarrassment and uses embarrassment when audacity is appropriate, or the opposite, causes very great damage. This corresponds to the prohibition of meat and milk. As known, all foods must be sorted out from the grip of evil that arises from the filth of the serpent, from the grip of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the essence of evil is the audacity of the realm of evil, as in, audacity is a kingship without a crown. Sanhedrin 105, which corresponds to the kingship of evil, the filth of the serpent, from which arise all lusts and sins, which all come from the audacity of the body, which is brazen and firm in lusts. The Rebbe also implies in Likutey Moharan, Part 138, that the audacity of the realm of evil is the filth of the serpent, and the audacity of the realm of evil, which is the filth of the serpent, is the essence of evil that is attached to all things in the world. This corresponds to all forbidden foods in the Torah. All the unclean species forbidden to us by the Torah is because evil, the audacity of the realm of evil, is very attached to them, as we can see for ourselves that most of the unclean species are very brazen, such as dogs are brazen, Isaiah 56:11. So we are forbidden to eat them, because we lack the power to sort them out from the firm grip of evil, which is the audacity of the body, the audacity of the realm of evil. So they are forbidden to eat, so that the audacity of the body will not increase in us by our eating them. On the other hand, all the species of insects and crawling creatures are forbidden because they are very weak and have no holy audacity at all. This too comes from the filth of the serpent, which corresponds to embarrassment and weakness of the realm of evil. So they are forbidden to eat, because we may only eat what the Torah allows, those species that come from holiness, which we are able to sort out, such that the audacity of the realm of evil or the weakness and embarrassment of the realm of evil will not come upon us through our eating them, but that we will be able to sort them out, such that holy audacity will come upon us, so that through our eating them we will derive strength for the service of God. Section 5. This corresponds to ritual slaughter. We are only allowed to eat anything from a living creature through ritual slaughter, for ritual slaughter subdues the spirit of animality from the creature, to which the audacity of the realm of evil, the audacity of the body, which corresponds to the spirit of animality, the cause of all lusts, which are the audacity of the body, are very attached. Even kosher foods all have some attachment of the evil from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, though those we are able to sort out through the commandments of the Torah. That is why we need slaughter, for the slaughter knife and sword correspond to holy might, as in, gird your sword on your waist, O warrior. Psalms 45:4. And might corresponds to audacity, as written, God is audacious and mighty, there, 24:8. This corresponds to sounds, which are the essence of holy audacity, as in praises of God in their throats and a double-edged sword in their hands, there, 149:6, meaning that through the knife and sword they overpower and subdue, with holy audacity, the animal's audacity of the realm of evil, which is the spirit of animality, which is the audacity of the body. That is why the slaughterer must receive the knife from the sage, by showing his knife to the sage, as our sages said, Chulin 17b. For every sage who studies Torah accordingly attains some level of we will hear and we will do, from which the power of holy audacity is acquired. Thus, the slaughterer may not slaughter unless he has first received permission from the sage, so that he will receive from him the power of holy audacity that the sage himself has acquired. This is because the slaughter is carried out through holy audacity, which corresponds to knife of the slaughter, through which we subdue the audacity of the body, which corresponds to the spirit of animality. Ritual slaughter is therefore only at the neck, for the grip of audacity is mainly at the neck, which is the site of sounds, for all sounds emerge through the neck, and all sounds correspond to audacity, as in, audacity rests in his neck, Job 41:14. Indeed, audacity is mainly in the neck, as Rashi explains on the verse. It will reach the neck, Isaiah 8:8. It will reach the strength of the neck, stating that the neck alludes to the essential strength and audacity of the body. That is why ritual slaughter is specifically at the neck, in order to subdue the audacity of animality, which is the audacity of the body, which is attached mainly to the neck, the site of sounds, to subdue it through the knife of slaughter, which corresponds to holy audacity. Section 6. Hence, the prohibition of the non-kosher species is essentially because they are in the category of the audacity of the realm of evil that we are unable to sort out, while the permitted species, though the audacity of the realm of evil is attached to them as well, we are able to sort out through the commandments of the Torah, That is why the Torah forbade mixing meat and milk. For milk corresponds to weakness, to embarrassment, while meat corresponds to audacity. Each one requires its own sorting out. Milk must be sorted out so that it is in the category of holy embarrassment. For embarrassment of the realm of evil is the essence of the audacity of the realm of evil, as said earlier, and meat also requires being sorted out from the audacity of the realm of evil, so that by eating it, we will attain holy audacity, which arises from joy. There is no joy other than through animal meat, Pesachim 109a, from which sacrificial offerings are brought. Hence, meat leads to joy, which corresponds to holy audacity. That is why meat and milk are both permissible by themselves, for each one by itself can be sorted out at its root and elevated to its root in holiness, but both together are severely prohibited. This is because the realm of evil draws its power from mixtures, from the chambers of exchanges that exchange and invert the traits audacity for embarrassment, and embarrassment for audacity, causing discouragement, embarrassment and laxity when audacity is needed, and the opposite. This corresponds to the prohibition of meat and milk, for as soon as we mix them together, the audacity of the realm of evil seizes the upper hand and discourages the person from making an effort in the service of God. This is because when the audacity and embarrassment of the realm of evil that are still attached to the meat and milk individually mix together, then we no longer are able to sort them out, for they reinforce and empower each other. This in turn is because the power of audacity of the realm of evil comes from embarrassment of the realm of evil. For when one is embarrassed to pray or serve God on account of the mockers, this causes the audacity of the body for all lusts to intensify in the individual, on account of which one then acts audaciously toward the God-fearing. And inversely, this audacity of the realm of evil leads one to embarrassment and shame in this world and the next. Thus, when meat and milk are mixed, the power of the realm of evil increases greatly through that mixture of the power of audacity of the realm of evil with the power of embarrassment of the realm of evil that are attached to the milk and meat individually. And we are then no longer able to sort them out, for their main power comes from mixtures, through which they exchange and invert the traits to be used in the opposite way of which each is supposed to be used. But each one by itself is permissible. For each one by itself, we are able to sort out at its root, whereas when they are mixed together, they achieve their greatest power, and then we are unable to sort them out, for which reason the mixture is forbidden. Section 7. The Torah prohibition is thus specifically when cooked together, for cooking is the ultimate sorting out, for the evil in the food is sorted out and separated by the fire, and only then does it become fitting for human consumption, for the fire consumes the filth and evil that is attached to it, as in, they emerged from the fire, and the fire will consume them. Ezekiel 15:7. So at this time during the cooking, when we are involved in sorting out the food, that is, when it is forbidden to mix the meat and milk, so that the realm of evil will not become empowered by the mixture of audacity and embarrassment from which it draws its nourishment, inverting the appropriateness and misleading people to be embarrassed when they should be audacious, or the opposite. Section 8. This is why the Torah expressed the prohibition of meat and milk as, "Do not cook a kid goat in its mother's milk," even though the truth is that all animal meat is forbidden in any milk. As our sages said, Chulin 113a, this alludes to the blemish that is caused by the mixing meat and milk, mixing the audacity of the realm of evil with embarrassment. For the forces of evil draw their main empowerment from this mixture which we are unable to sort out. The kid goat alludes to audacity, as in a kid goat of goats, Genesis 38:17, from the same root as the word for audacity. This also corresponds to a kid of goats, as in Esau is a hairy man. There, 27:10 Esau who is the essence of the audacity of the realm of evil, the audacity of the body, the filth of the serpent, the kingship of evil. For their kingship, which is a kingship without a crown, is attained only through audacity. That is why most of the public offerings of atonement are kid goats. All the public sin offerings, such as those of the new moon, the festivals, and Yom Kippur, because the audacity of the realm of evil is greatest in the kid goats, for which very reason they are called by a name from the same root as the word for audacity. And the ultimate sorting out is in them, which is why the ultimate atonement is through them, for a judgment can only be ameliorated at its root. That is why the Torah refers to all animals as kid goat, as our sages said. Wherever the verse says kid goat, it includes calves and sheep as well. Shulin 113a, for all animals have audacity, which corresponds to the spirit of animality, but the greatest audacity is in the kid of goats, which is why all animals are included in that name. So the prohibition of meat and milk, which is essentially so that the audacity of the realm of evil will not intensify through the mixture of embarrassment with audacity, as said. Therefore, it uses kid goat to include all animals, to allude that the essence of the prohibition is because of the audacity, which corresponds to the kid of goats. This corresponds to its mother's milk, though the prohibition includes others' milk as well. This teaches us that the essence of the prohibition is because milk comes from weakness and embarrassment, which correspond to mother's milk. For females, correspond to weakness and embarrassment in contrast to males, who are audacious and strong. So, the essence of the prohibition is to prevent the mixing of audacity with embarrassment, which corresponds to a kid goat in its mother's milk, from which the forces of evil draw their nourishment by inverting and exchanging the appropriateness of each, as said. Mother's milk also alludes that this blemish empowers the filth of the serpent injected into Eve, the mother of all life, from which arises the audacity of the realm of evil, which is the embarrassment of the realm of evil that discourages a person from toiling in the service of God. Section 9. Thus, when the tribes erred in selling Joseph, they slaughtered a kid goat, Genesis 37:31, for their main dispute with him was regarding dominion. They argued that Joseph seeks to rule over them unjustly, appearing to them as seeking to rule over them only through audacity. So they fought back against him with their own audacity, slaughtering a kid goat, which corresponds to audacity. Similarly, Judah said to Tamar, "I will send you a kid goat from the flock." There, 38:17. For the greatest battle is waged between holy audacity and its opposite, sexual lust, in which the audacity of the realm of evil is most potent, as the sexual organ is called by a name meaning, in it is audacity. Tikkunei Zohar 31:75b. So Judah at that time had to sort out holy audacity, which is the root of holy kingship, specifically the kingship of David and the Messiah, who would descend from him through this act, regarding which is written, "God, in your might will a king rejoice." Psalms 21:2. As in, he will grant might to his king and elevate the stature of his anointed one. 1 Samuel 2:10. That is why Judah said at that time, "I will send a kid goat," specifically a kid goat. For the ultimate sorting out of audacity is specifically in a kid goat, which is why they are brought for public atonement offerings on new moons, festivals, and Yom Kippur, on all of which are brought specifically a kid goat for atonement. This is because the ultimate atonement of sins is attained through the sorting out of holy audacity from the audacity of the realm of evil, which is the audacity of the body, from which all lusts arise. Whoever is able to sort them out transforms the audacity of the body into holiness, merging the kid goat into holiness. But if not, then the opposite is true. This corresponds to the entire story that took place between Jacob and Esau surrounding the blessings. Rebekah's advice to Jacob was, specifically, bring me from there 2 kid goats, Genesis 27:9. For all blessings come through holy audacity, as in, God will grant might to his people. God will bless his people. Psalms 29:11, corresponding to the blessing of rain that comes through might. That is why Rebekah instructed him to prepare 2 kid goats to rectify and sort them out, so that he would subdue the audacity of the realm of evil, which is the filth of the serpent, corresponding to Esau is a hairy man, as above, thereby attaining holy audacity, through which he would be able to receive the blessings that come through there. And similarly, regarding Samson, it is written, he gifted his wife with a kid goat. Judges 15:1. For Samson sought at that time to overpower the Philistines, who then ruled over the Israelites unjustly, only through audacity, as written there. He was seeking an excuse there. 14:4. That is why he utilized a kid goat. However, he was unable to fully sort it out properly, unlike Judah, who was able to fully sort it out, as our sages pointed out Sotah 10a, to the extent that from Judah descended the Messiah, who embodies the ultimate audacity of holiness, from which the holy kingship arises, as in, he will grant might to his king, as said. Section 10. Thus, the prohibition of meat and milk is essentially so that the audacity of the realm of evil not be intensified and weaken the holy audacity by drawing nourishment from and mixing the nourishment of the audacity of the realm of evil with that of embarrassment and weakness of the realm of evil, which corresponds to the mixing of meat and milk, for then we are unable to sort them out. Then the audacity of the realm of evil intensifies and weakens the holy audacity, from which arise all types of discouragement in the human heart, all of which arise from a blemishing in holy audacity, on account of which one becomes discouraged from toiling in the service of God, regardless of one's current spiritual state. For the truth is that in holiness, one must have audacity even toward God himself, even knowing that one has sinned and rebelled against him. Nevertheless, if one then is embarrassed to ask of God to bring him close to his service, or embarrassed to serve him on account of one's many sins, this is not holy embarrassment, but, on the contrary, this is embarrassment of the realm of evil that discourages a person in order to completely distance them from God. True holy embarrassment should be used before sinning, having great embarrassment before God literally as one would have before another human being, so that one commits no sin, not even doing anything counter to God's will, but afterward, after the inclination for evil has already overpowered the person and caused them to sin in whatever way, then one must put aside embarrassment and audaciously come before God declaring, "Though I have done whatever I have done, and am ashamed and disgraced to lift my face before you, nevertheless, I audaciously face you and beg of you to bring me close to you now." And even if this happens many times, one must never become discouraged, but only strengthen oneself to begin again each time anew, as long as one's soul is still within. That is the essence of holy audacity, never getting discouraged from previous days, but forgetting each time what has passed and beginning anew each time. This is because all discouragement comes from mother's milk, to which the filth of the serpent is attached. This corresponds to the prohibition of meat and milk. When milk is by itself, it can be sorted out and brought into holiness. But when it is mixed with meat, to which the audacity of the realm of evil is attached, which must be sorted out by itself, this mixture cannot be sorted out. Then, the holy audacity is blemished, and the audacity of the filth that is attached to mother's milk on account of Adam's sin is intensified, which causes the person to become discouraged, and the audacity of the realm of evil to intensify. For when one power weakens, the other is intensified. Section 11. The eating of a Jewish person must be with holiness, For through holiness is the body strengthened, so we must eat with great holiness, according to the Torah, so that the audacity of the body will not be increased through one's eating. And the holiness of eating is attained mainly through holy audacity, which corresponds to joy, which is attained through we will do and we will hear. Eating is then in holiness, as in to eat, to drink, and to rejoice. Ecclesiastes 5:15, specifically to rejoice. For the essence of holy eating is when one is able to rejoice, which corresponds to holy audacity, through which the audacity of the body is weakened. In fact, through such eating is the soul strengthened to toil in the service of God, as in a tzaddik eats to his soul's satiation. Proverbs 13:25. This is, go eat your bread with joy. Ecclesiastes 9:7, and eat delicacies and drink sweets and be not saddened, for God's joy is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10, meaning that when one is able to elicit joy, which is holy audacity, as in God's joy is your strength, as explained in the lesson, then it is a mitzvah to eat, as in eat delicacies. For God's joy is your strength, since holy audacity has been strengthened through this eating, and one has attained greater joy, as in eat, drink, and rejoice. This corresponds to all the blessings that our sages instituted to recite over all things we eat and enjoy. This is because it is only possible to eat with holiness through holy sounds, which correspond to all the blessings we recite over all things, since all blessings and holy sounds correspond to holy audacity, as in, He will give forth with His voice a sound of strength, Psalms 68:34, as explained in the lesson. This corresponds to all the forbidden foods. They correspond to the audacity of the body, the audacity of the realm of evil, for very attached to them is, with sadness will you eat it. Genesis 3:17, specifically sadness, in contrast to joy, which is the holy audacity. But permissible foods we are able to sort out through the blessing, to eat them with holiness corresponding to joy, which is holy audacity, as in eat, drink, and rejoice. That is why the main holy eating is on Shabbat and festivals, which are times of joy. As written, there is no good for a human being other than to eat, drink, and rejoice. Ecclesiastes 8:15, which our sages explain as meaning on Shabbat and festivals, Zohar, Part 2, 225a. This is because great joy is aroused throughout all the worlds on Shabbat and festivals. Since then, the crowns of we will do and we will hear are restored to the Jewish people pre-Etz Chaim, Shabbat, chapter 8. Similarly, the festivals are all a commemoration of the Exodus from Egypt, which corresponds to Torah giving. For the essence of the Exodus from Egypt was for the purpose of Torah giving, as written, when you take the people out of Egypt, you will serve God at this mountain. Exodus 3:12. That is why on the festivals there is an illumination of Torah giving, when the people had declared, we will do and we will hear, which is the source of joy, as stated in the lesson. And on all days on which there is extra holiness, there is additional joy from we will do and we will hear. For any day on which there is extra holiness, to whatever extent, the filth of the serpent, which corresponds to the sin of the golden calf, which had caused a disappearance of the crowns of we will do and we will hear, which are the source of joy, is banished. But then an illumination of these crowns is restored on this day, to the extent of the extra holiness of that day, through which joy is elicited on that day. But even on a regular weekday, we must sanctify eating through the holiness of Shabbat, as our sages said, remember it, from the first day of the week, Mekilta, the new month. 7, so that one will eat on all of one's days, in honor of Shabbat Beitzah 16a. This is because we must evoke the holiness from Shabbat into the 6 weekdays, sanctifying eating and refining it from the curse of, with sadness will you eat it, evoking upon it the holiness of Shabbat from the crowns, which we are endeavoring throughout our lives to restore upon us, so that they will once again shine into us. Each individual, to the extent of their holiness, evokes the holiness of Shabbat into the weekdays and attains an illumination of, we will do and we will hear, which are the crowns, and to that extent attains joy, and to that extent is their eating with holiness, with holy audacity, corresponding to joy, as in, eat delicacies. For God's joy is your strength. That is why at Torah giving, they beheld God, and they ate and they drank. Exodus 24:11. For they had then attained those crowns, through which eating is with holiness, through which they attained an even higher, we will do and we will hear. Through this one comes to recognize God, as in, they beheld God, and they ate and they drank, as in, you shall eat before your God, and you shall rejoice. Deuteronomy 14:23 and 26. Specifically, rejoice. Section 12. There are still many more points related to this. The first commandment given to Adam was specifically regarding eating, that he not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which is nourished mainly from the mixture of knowledge, the mixing of the knowledge of two different levels, such as of two generations, leading one to desire to attain everything immediately before one is ready. When we eat, we obtain added vitality, but the ultimate vitality comes through we will do and we will hear. As written, God is your life. Deuteronomy 30:20. For the essence of life is to constantly live every moment anew. New vitality can be constantly attained through we will do and we will hear, for we must always strive to attain a higher level of this. This corresponds to eating from the tree of life, regarding which is said, he will eat and live forever. Genesis 3:22. An eating that will be attained by the righteous in the future, in the banquet that God will make for them from the Leviathan, the wild ox, and aged wine. Through this eating, they will be able to constantly attain the crowns anew, constantly a higher level of we will do and we will hear, which is the ultimate essence of life and delight of the world of the future. But Adam ate from the tree of knowledge and delved into things that were beyond him. He mixed up the knowledge that comes from two separate generations, on account of which he fell into desiring things that were not relevant to his level, seeking to ascend and attain things beyond his level. That is the cause of all the prohibitions in the Torah and the cause of all confusions of every individual who desires to know and understand everything with their earthly intelligence, such that one is constantly disturbed by questions about God and the tzaddikim. But even the questions that arise about oneself, this too is not healthy, but is caused by the forces of evil that discourage the individual with these questions about oneself, such as, how can you want to pray with devotion and enthusiasm when just a short while ago you did this or that, which is just an example of countless other confusions that arise. All of this is caused by the filth of the serpent that confuses the individual who seeks to understand everything, while the truth is that we know nothing at all, as mentioned in the Etz Chaim cited earlier. King Solomon, who was the wisest of all, said, I declared, I will attain wisdom, but it is distant from me. Ecclesiastes 7:23, and I am ignorant among men and possess no human understanding. Proverbs 32. While King David said, I am ignorant and know nothing. I am an animal before you. Psalms 73:22. And all the more so, thousands and myriads more so, is this true of simple people, especially in our generations. In some, we know nothing, and whatever you have the opportunity and power to do, do. Ecclesiastes 9:10. As long as one is able to grab some holy act from this ephemeral world, a word of Torah, a prayer, some mitzvah such as charity, kindness, how wonderful, for ultimately nothing else besides this will remain for you. If you follow this path and constantly make the effort to begin again anew, grabbing every holy act that you can, then you will always have it good, and ultimately you will reach the ultimate and eternal good in this world and the next. Section 13. This explains why the prohibition of meat and milk is juxtaposed to the mitzvah of the first fruits, as written, "You shall bring the first fruits of your land to God's temple." Do not cook a kid goat in its mother's milk. Exodus 23:19. The first fruits correspond to renewal. We must bring the first fruits to ripen and renew every year, bringing them immediately to the temple, to praise God for them, and to tell of all the troubles that the Jewish people have endured since their very beginning, and God's saving us with His awesome kindness and wonders. As stated in the first fruit declaration, "You shall declare and say before your God, an Aramaean sought to annihilate my forefather, and he descended to Egypt and settled there in small number, becoming there a great nation, mighty and numerous. But the Egyptians persecuted us." Deuteronomy 26:5-6. This is because the very essence of the obligation of bringing the first fruits alludes to renewal, that we must constantly renew ourselves all the time and repeatedly begin again anew, not allowing our thoughts about all the tribulations, obstacles, and surging of the inclination for evil and everything else we endure to cause us to panic. We must remember God's kindness and the wonders that He did for us collectively and individually ever since Egypt and until now. But we must also remember that even before we descended to Egypt, Lavan the Aramean pursued Jacob, cheating him tens of times when Jacob worked for him, but God did not allow him to harm Jacob. Not only did he fail to annihilate him as he desired, but Jacob took Lavan's 2 daughters with him, through whom the world was founded, raising through them the holy tribes, through whom God is manifested in the world. They were all flawless, and all proclaimed at Jacob's departing, "Hear, O Israel, Hashem is our God. Hashem is one," and all that the Jewish people have endured ever since then is beyond the ability of the mouth to express. Similarly, every single Jewish individual will experience all of these dynamics. For Lavan, Esau, Egypt, the 4 kingdoms and their armies all rise up against each Jewish individual. They all seek to annihilate the Jewish people as a whole in every single generation, as well as every single Jewish individual. But God saves us from their hands, from all the pursuits, incitations, and attacks that the inclination for evil and its armies launch against every individual every single day and every single moment. All this comes from the above forces of Lavan, Esau, and so forth. For even the attacks of Lavan, Esau, and Egypt against the Jewish people were only because the forces of evil had become embodied in them to attack them simply because they were following the path of God that had been passed down to them from Abraham, and because they were firm in faith in the one Creator who oversees and rules over all. Similarly, in every generation there are physical and spiritual enemies who rise up to prevent and obstruct the work of heaven. But God constantly helps us, as we declare 3 times a day, "For your miracles that are with us every day, and for your wonders of every moment, evening, morning, and afternoon, O good one, for your compassion never ceases." There is no way to be spared from all this other than through full faith in God, which corresponds to renewal, as in, renewed each morning. How great is your faith. Lamentations 3:23. This means that one must know the ultimate truth, that one knows nothing at all, but must strengthen oneself in the holy faith that we have received from our holy ancestors, and not allow anything in the world to confuse to us. For we know nothing at all besides what we have been taught by our sages. They said that we must break all lusts in the world, not only something that is an explicit sin, from which we must certainly flee as from a fire, but even from a simple lust or any movement that is not according to God's will. We must flee and distance ourselves as far as possible, for it causes great blemish to a Jewish soul. as well as to all the thousands and myriads of worlds that are dependent upon each individual. They also said that even if one has sinned however gravely as they have sinned, even if one has transgressed the entire Torah thousands of times, nevertheless, there is no cause at all in the world for despair. Rather, one must begin again anew each time, for God receives pleasure and delight from even the lowest of the lowest. In fact, that is God's greatness, when the very distant ones acknowledge Him, strengthening their faith in Him and praising Him, as the Rebbe has explained several times, for example, Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 10, 59. That is why we must renew ourselves constantly, corresponding to the first fruit, which correspond to renewal. Our sages thus said on the verse, "In the beginning, God created the world for the first fruit," which are called the beginning, Genesis Rabbah 1:4. This is because the creation of the world was essentially for this very purpose, for renewal, which corresponds to the first fruit that correspond to the beginning, as in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. For the creation of the heavens and the earth was for the beginning, so that the human being will constantly begin from the beginning, as if this very moment is the beginning of one's life, for this is the ultimate rectification of the worlds. Even God Himself literally renews creation every single day, as we declare, "Who renews in His kindness every day, constantly, the works of creation," and, as in morning prayers, "Who does new things every day." This is why, immediately after the first fruits declaration, followed by the tithe declaration, the verse says, "Today God instructs you, and today you have become a people, as I instruct you today." Deuteronomy 26, 16 through 27. 1, where Rashi comments, "Every day it should seem to you as if this day you have entered into the covenant with God. As said, this is the essence of the first fruits, which correspond to daily renewal. As if today one has entered into the covenant and is beginning to train oneself to enter into Jewish holiness." That is why the prohibition of meat and milk is juxtaposed to the mitzvah of the first fruits. For the essence of the prohibition of meat and milk is that one should not fall into agedness of the realm of evil, which is the cause of all confusions, all of which is caused by mother's milk getting mixed with meat. So it is juxtaposed to the mitzvah of the first fruits, which itself corresponds to the very opposite of agedness of the realm of evil. For the first fruits correspond to the beginning, to daily renewal. Section 14. This corresponds to proclaim His salvation from day to day. 1 Chronicles 16:23. God sends new salvations every single day to rescue the individual from the realm of evil that intensifies every day. As our sages said, the inclination for evil intensifies every day. And if God would not help the individual, Sukkah 52a, and hence every individual confronts completely new things every single day, and God helps and rescues them every time. Thus, one should not allow oneself to become confused in any way from one day to the next, for who knows what great and new salvation God will send their way today if one only makes the effort to begin again anew. This may be alluded to in our sages' teaching. The prohibition of meat and milk is unique. Pesachim 44b, specifically unique, novel, in that the essence of the prohibition is so that one will not fall into the agedness of the realm of evil on account of one's eating, but will be able to renew oneself repeatedly. That is the meaning of the prohibition of meat and milk is unique. For the essence of the commandment is so that one will be able to be consistently novel and unique. Section 15. This corresponds to Hanukkah, from the root meaning training and beginning. Through the mitzvah of Hanukkah, we are able to evoke holy audacity upon ourselves, such that we will be able to constantly strengthen ourselves in the service of God. mainly by constantly beginning again anew. That is the essence of the word Hanukkah, that our service will always be like training and beginning, as if we have just begun to train ourselves in the service of God today. This corresponds to the adding of an extra candle every evening. By beginning again anew every day, we thereby constantly increase our service of God with great additions, since we are toiling every day with new effort, with a new beginning, with a new arousal. This corresponds to the mitzvah of kindling the Hanukkah lights with oil, which corresponds to the holy audacity that we receive through the joy that we attain through. We will do and we will hear, which are the manifest and hidden Torah and prayer, which correspond to the 2 crowns that the Israelites received at Torah giving. The holy anointing oil corresponds to holy intelligence, which corresponds to the holy anointing oil, which corresponds to the totality of all the holy intelligences that correspond to the 2 crowns, which are the manifest and hidden Torah and prayer, which are the totality of all the intelligences embodied by the holy anointing oil. The oil corresponds to the crowns on the head, as in, oil on your head will not be lacking. Ecclesiastes 9:8, and as in, as good oil on the head, Psalms 133:2, and from this holy oil on the head, which corresponds to the totality of holy intelligences that correspond to the crowns, that correspond to the manifest and hidden Torah and prayer. From there we draw the light to kindle the holy and awesome Hanukkah candles that burn from this holy oil. The kindling of the Hanukkah candles corresponds to the evoking upon ourselves of holy audacity, through which we are able to make the first step into holiness, as in, you led with your audacity into the dwelling place of your holiness, Exodus 15:13, as explained in the lesson. This is because holy audacity, which is the voices of holiness, corresponds to fire, as in, we heard his voice from within the fire, Deuteronomy 5:21, as in, God's voice hews flames of fire, Psalms 29:7. This corresponds to, set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for love is audacious as death, zealousy as harsh as the grave. Its sparks are flames of fire. A flame of God, Song of Songs 8:6. The congregation of Israel is saying here before God that their holy audacity is as strong as flames of fire, as in, love is as audacious as death. Its sparks are flames of fire. That is why they request to thereby be able to rectify the 2 seals which correspond to a seal within a seal that are impossible to attain without holy audacity. As explained well in the lesson, study there. This is, set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, which corresponds to the 2 seals, to the seal within a seal. This corresponds to the Hanukkah candle that is kindled and burns with oil. The essential power of kindling, which is the power of fire, is through oil. For oil corresponds to the 2 crowns, from which holy audacity, which corresponds to fire, as said, to the kindling with fire of the Hanukkah candles, derives its power. Through the oil, which corresponds to the crown, the heart thereby burns for God as flames of fire, shining with a great light, which corresponds to holy audacity, as in, love is as audacious. This corresponds to the Chanukah candle that burns and shines with a great light throughout all worlds through the holy oil, which corresponds to holy audacity, which corresponds to fire that is brought about through the holy anointing oil, which corresponds to the 2 crowns as said earlier. The ultimate training to follow God's path is only through the holy audacity that is received from the crowns, for it is impossible to approach holiness and train oneself in the service of God other than through holy audacity. Furthermore, the main power of the Jewish people to help the holy kingship to overpower the kingship of evil is only through holy audacity, as explained in the lesson that the power of the kingship of evil comes through the evil audacity of the realm of evil, the brazen ones of the generation who seek power and status, desiring to rule solely through audacity. for audacity is a kingship without a crown. Sanhedrin 105a. So we must counter them with great holy audacity to stand up against their evil audacity. For their evil audacity corresponds to audacity is a kingship without a crown, specifically without a crown. This means that when one is unable to evoke the holiness of the crowns, which are the source of holy audacity, then their evil audacity, which is a kingship without a crown, specifically without a crown, is empowered. But when we counter them with holy audacity that comes from the crowns, then their evil audacity, which is only a kingship specifically without a crown, is subdued and falls away. When we shine these crowns, which are the source of holy audacity, then their audacity falls away and disappears. For the holy kingship is established through holy audacity that comes from the crowns, which corresponds to, O God, a king will rejoice in your audacity. Psalms 21:2. And he will grant audacity to his king. 1 Samuel 2:10, which refers to the kingship of the Messiah, which is a holy kingship. This corresponds to the crown of Malchut, kingship. For the holy kingship, which is established through holy audacity, is crowned with a crown of holiness, for its entire power comes from the crowns. This corresponds to the oil, which corresponds to the crown, through which all the kings and priests were anointed and crowned with their crowns. All of the holy priests and kings were anointed with the anointing oil, through which they were crowned with their crowns, for the oil corresponds to the crowns, from which holy audacity is derived, from which comes the power of the holy kingship. This itself corresponds to the great and awesome miracle of Hanukkah, when a very small number of people, Matityahu and his sons, overpowered the huge legions of the wicked Greek Empire, for they had grasped and understood that the entire power of the evil kingdom is only through the audacity of the realm of evil, from which the evil kingdom derives its power, which is solely through audacity, which is a kingdom without a crown. Anyone a bit familiar with the stories of the kings of old can understand this. All of these kings and their officers reached power only through their evil audacity, through which each time a different officer would plot with great audacity against his master to kill him and seize the kingdom for himself. Most of the ancient kings were not of royal blood, except for a few generations, after which some servant would rise against his master through plotting and killing him, then taking the throne for himself. All of this plotting, murders, and eventual rule were all entirely through their evil audacity. This is very clear to anyone who looks into these stories a bit, especially regarding the evil Greek Empire that overpowered the Jewish people at that time, whose entire kingdom was only through the audacity they used against their own masters, the kings of Persia, killing them and taking over their empire. All this took place only through the evil audacity of the realm of evil. And with their evil audacity, they then sought to overpower the Jewish people by oppressing them harshly. They began to deconstruct the temple and sought to uproot the entire Torah, all through their intense evil audacity. No one was able to stand up against them to subdue them with holy audacity until God had compassion on his people and empowered the hearts of Matityahu and his son, imbuing their hearts with holy audacity, such that they reached such intense holy audacity that 5 people girded their loins to stand up against such a huge army of mighty warriors, all through the great power of holy audacity, through which Matityahu had the power to overcome the evil Greek Empire, whose entire kingdom was established through the audacity of the realm of evil. Through the great power of holy audacity, they overpowered them and subdued them, humiliating them to the ground. That is why the miracle came about through the high priest. The holiness of the high priest comes from the anointing oil, which corresponds to the crowns, from which the power of holy audacity is derived, as said above. That is why the Messiah, the ultimate kingship of holiness, is called Mashiach, for his entire power of kingship comes through holy audacity that is derived from the oil of anointing, which corresponds to the crowns. This is as in, oil and incense gladden the heart, Proverbs 27:9. Through the oil, which corresponds to the crowns, joy is thereby evoked, as in, eternal joy on their heads, which corresponds to holy audacity, as in, God's joy is your audacity, as stated in the lesson. Study there. Section 16. This corresponds to the recitation of the Hallel on Chanukah, which is in fact the very essence of Chanukah, as we state in prayers. They instituted 8 days of Chanukah to thank and praise your great name. The ultimate joy, which corresponds to holy audacity, is greatly attained through prayer, which corresponds to, we will hear, to the complete saying, as in, rejoice with trembling, Psalms 2:11, and God-fearing is to be praised, Proverbs 31:30, as explained in the lesson. That is why through the Hallel of Chanukah, which corresponds to prayer, to fear, as in God-fearing is to be praised, we thereby attain the ultimate wholeness of joy, which is holy audacity, which is the essence of the miracle of Chanukah. It is this that we must evoke upon ourselves every year, so that we are able to always overcome all the obstacles to holiness, whose main power to influence and obstruct comes solely through the audacity of the realm of evil, which is a kingship without a crown, such that anyone so desiring can seize power and attempt to obstruct others from the path of truth. But through holy audacity we are able to overcome them, which is the main path of training and entrance into holiness, for it is otherwise impossible to approach holiness. Section 17. So, the Torah reading on Chanukah is from the section of the princes, for the 12 princes correspond to the totality of kingship and status of all leaders of holiness, whose power comes through the holy audacity that they receive from the crowns. So the power of these 12 princes of the 12 tribes comes entirely from the 12 precious stones that were on the priestly breastplate that were brought by the princes, as written, the princes brought the stones. Exodus 35:27. For the stones of the breastplate correspond to the power of the crowns, since the precious stones correspond to crowns that are made from precious stones. Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 18. Thus, it is from these precious stones of the priestly breastplate, which correspond to the power of the crowns, that the 12 princes have the power to attain holy audacity, through which they have power of holy status and kingship. They must indeed be as strong as the precious stones to counter the evil audacity that is as thick as an evil stone, corresponding to the heart of stone, as written, Behold, I have made your foreheads strong to counter their foreheads. Ezekiel 3:8. That is why the stones were carried on the high priest's heart and on his 2 shoulders, which correspond to the 2 seals, as in, as a seal on your heart, as a seal on your arm. These stones correspond to seals of holiness, upon which were engraved the holy names of the 12 tribes of Israel, as written, the stones shall be engraved. Exodus 28:21. For these 2 seals of holiness are attained only through holy audacity, which corresponds to the priestly breastplate as said. Section 18. The section of the breastplate is thus immediately after the section of kindling the candles of the candelabra. This is because the kindling of the candelabra candles with oil corresponds to the holy audacity that is received from the holy oil, which corresponds to the Chanukah candle, which itself corresponds to the stones of the breastplate, so the 2 are adjacent. Section 19. The entire Psalm 21 revolves around this. O God, a king will rejoice in your audacity, refers to the kingdom of the Messiah, which is the kingship of holiness. Thus, O God, a king will rejoice in your audacity, for audacity corresponds to joy, from which the Messiah derives the power of his kingship, as said. You have given him the desire of his heart, and have not withheld the expression of his lips, means that the Messiah attains complete prayer, such that he is able to attain through his prayer everything he desires. As in, you have not withheld the expression of his lips, For the ultimate wholeness of joy, which corresponds to holy audacity, is attained through the wholeness of prayer, as said. And the ultimate wholeness of prayer is when one truly attains God's Torah and God's prayer, as stated in the lesson. Also explained there is that this corresponds to merging into the ayin, which corresponds to being answered first. Study there well. This corresponds to you preceded it with blessings of good, which corresponds to being answered first, to the wholeness of prayer, which corresponds to before they call out. I will answer Isaiah 65:24, which is because one has merged into God's prayer, and then one's prayer is God's prayer. As if God is praying that prayer, as in God will pray for him, Psalm 72:15, which refers to the Messiah. Then one merges into before creation, and then one's request is filled before one asks for it, as in he is answered first, Bava, 91a, as in before they call out, as in you preceded it with blessings of good, as Rashi explains there. You preceded it before I asked of you. This is, you set a golden crown on his head. This corresponds to the crowns made from we will do and we will hear, which are Torah and prayer. And the ultimate wholeness of the crowns is through prayer, which corresponds to a complete saying in which the two crowns are merged together, as explained in the lesson. The psalm then says, put forward your hand to all of your enemies. Make them into a fiery furnace. May the fire consume them. Unquote. Holy audacity, which is the kingship of holiness, corresponds to holy fire Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 4, through which the obstructors and enemies that come from the kingship of the realm of evil are subdued. For they came from the fire, and fire will consume them. Ezekiel 15:7. Since their entire power comes through their evil audacity that is intense and burns like fire. That is why they will end up falling into the fire of hell. For a brazen face goes to hell, as the Rebbe writes there. That is why through holy audacity, which corresponds to holy fire, we thereby subdue them and cast them down, as the psalm says there. He will swallow them with his nostril, and the fire will consume them. This is why the psalm there concludes with, be exalted, O God, in your audacity. We will sing and chant of your might. We are here asking of God to be exalted with the holy audacity that he will send upon us, through which we are able to overcome the enemies and obstructors, after which we will sing and chant of your might, the awesome wonders that he has done for us, by blessing us with such audacity to stand up against the enemies and obstructors on all sides, both material and spiritual. For we would not be able to stand up against them without the holy audacity that he constantly sends upon us. Section 20. This explains why King David frequently asked for holy audacity to subdue the audacity of the realm of evil. Against his audacity, I wait for you. For my audacity I sing to you. Psalms 59:10 and 18. And grant your audacity to your servant. There, 86:16 and many others. David also praises God many times for granting holy audacity to the Jewish people. Attribute audacity to God. God of Israel is he who grants audacity to the people. There, 68:35. And God grants audacity to his people. There, 29:11. And my audacity and song is God. He is my salvation. There, 118:14. This is because the ultimate salvation from enemies is through holy audacity. Section 21. This is why there are 8 days of Chanukah, paralleling the 8 garments of the high priest, which are listed adjacent to the oil of the candelabra, which corresponds to Chanukah. This is as in, your garments should be white at all times, and oil on your head should never be lacking. Ecclesiastes 9:8. White garments correspond to garments of holiness, to the priestly garments, which correspond to oil on your head. to the candelabra oil, which corresponds to the Hanukkah candles. Garments correspond to the kingship Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 29. And the essence of the kingship is the holy audacity that comes from oil that is on the head, as said earlier. This corresponds to God reigns, he dons majesty. He girds himself with audacity. Psalms 93. 1 for garments correspond to kingship, which corresponds to audacity. This corresponds to the 8 threads of the tzitzit, which are the rectification of garments, paralleling, which are the 8 days of Hanukkah, for the rectification of garments corresponds to oil, as said. Laws of mixtures. Section 22. This corresponds to mixtures, in which something forbidden can render something permissible forbidden on account of the mixture. The forbidden, which corresponds to the audacity of the realm of evil, blemishes the permissible and transforms it into the forbidden, into audacity of the realm of evil. Thus, if the amount of the permissible is 60 times more than the forbidden in the mixture is not rendered forbidden. For when one is unable to dissolve the audacity of the realm of evil, which corresponds to the forbidden, the forces of evil, one is then punished by 60, which is hell, as the Rebbe writes there in the lesson. So when the permissible is 60 times greater than the forbidden, which is the audacity, is then subdued and dissolved, for the 60, which is hell, is its punishment. The 60 of permissible overcomes it and dissolves it, for the holy audacity, which is the holy kingship, is empowered, as in, he will grant audacity to his king, which corresponds to. There are 60 queens, Song of Songs 6:8, thereby dissolving the forbidden, which is the audacity of the realm of evil, which is punished with 60, which is hell. That is why the forbidden can only be dissolved when it is indiscernible in the mixture, and it must also not be a respectable piece of food on its own, for as long as the forbidden is discernible, its audacity has still not been dissolved. For the essence of audacity is in one's brazenly and unabashedly showing one's filthy face. That is why, as long as the forbidden is discernible, it is still in its audacity and can therefore not be dissolved in any way. Similarly, if it is a respectable piece of food, respect, which corresponds to glory, to the kingship, to audacity, as in glory and audacity, Psalms 29. Then the forbidden, which is a respectable piece of food, is under the dominion of the glory and audacity of the realm of evil, which is the kingship of the realm of evil, which is a kingdom without a crown, for the brazen ones seize all glory for themselves. For this reason it is impossible to dissolve something forbidden like this, because the audacity is very attached to it. And the same applies to anything forbidden of importance, such as an entire creature, or something that is counted, or living creatures, since this importance points to the attachment of glory, which corresponds to the kingship of the realm of evil, so it cannot be dissolved. But when the forbidden is not discernible and has no importance, then it can dissolve in 60, for the holy kingship then overcomes it. Section 23. This corresponds to the seal within a seal, in which we must mark certain kosher foods when transporting them, so that they are not exchanged for something forbidden. Yoreh De'ah 118. A seal within a seal comes from holy audacity, through which we are able to come close to the authentic tzaddikim, who correspond to the seal of the hands, through whom the seal of the feet is also guarded, whereas forbidden foods, which correspond to blemished audacity, correspond to a blemish in the seal within a seal. That is why it is impossible to guard Jewish food from them without a seal within a seal, which is a sign that the kosher Jewish foods, which are holy audacity, the source of the seal within a seal, as said, are in perfect condition. Law 5. Based on the lesson in Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 30. Study there the entire lesson. In sum, specifically, the greatest teacher of all is required in order to attain perceptions of godliness, which can only be received through many constrictions, from a higher intelligence to a lower intelligence, and so forth. That is why one should not say, "It's enough for me to follow a simple, upright person." For on the contrary, the more ill a person is, the greater the teacher that is needed. Section 1. The fact is that if one chooses to follow someone who is on a relatively low level, then even if that other person is incomparably greater than oneself and can be considered a tzaddik compared to oneself, nevertheless, not only will that other person not be of any benefit to one, since one is so greatly ill, for that other person who is himself on a low level is unable to heal one's great soul ailments, but they will also cause one great spiritual damage. This is all the more so when that other one who is on a relatively low level disputes and opposes the great, authentic tzaddik who is on an exceedingly high level, toiling his entire life to evoke perceptions of godliness in wondrous ways through exceedingly deep, amazing, awesome, and exalted intelligences, such that through his great power and wisdom, he is able to introduce a perception of godliness even into those on a very low level. With his great power, he has left behind very awesome books and novel revelations, and his precious followers continue the illumination of his holy understanding for posterity, which is the ultimate perfection of the authentic tzaddikim, that their understanding will remain for posterity even after their passing. We have seen this with all of the holy, authentic tzaddikim of the previous generations, and as the Rebbe writes elsewhere, Likutey Moharan, Part 2, 7. But the one who is on a relatively low level hasn't the slightest idea how to evoke perceptions of godliness into the world, for he himself has not even begun to perceive the most elementary perception, as we can see and understand from their words and teachings, in which he says things that even school children know better than he does. Thus, when such an individual opposes such a tzaddik who gives such teachings, and the tzaddik's followers who study his holy books, through which they are able to heal even the most critically spiritually ill, for tzaddikim are greater after their departing than during their lifetimes. Chulin 7b, and the followers continue after his lifetime to evoke and shine perceptions of godliness even into the furthest and the most ill through their books and their precious followers. This person who opposes them will certainly cause very great damage to whoever listens to them, which will cause one to become distant from this source of life. Section 2. The Rebbe says, there is rightness everywhere, and even in one who does many unjust wrongs must inevitably have some rightness, the only difference being at which point one's rightness begins. For an upright person, rightness begins immediately, for it is obviously forbidden to do any unjust wrong, but one who is not as upright as he should be will do some wrong before his sense of rightness begins, so that he does not do any greater wrong. And another will do a greater wrong to another before their sense of rightness begins upon being confronted with the opportunity to do an even greater wrong. Sichot Haran 78. But we could rightly wonder and be perplexed about this when we see that during the disputes, those who oppose the truth do such great wrongs without showing the slightest sense of rightness, as we have ourselves witnessed many times, specifically when the dispute comes from the somewhat upright and famous who instruct their followers to persecute and destroy others. Where does their sense of rightness begin? Are they not upright and righteous? How has rightness gone so far beyond them? However, the truth is that even in this unjust wrong, there is certainly rightness, for these opposers claim that they possess the truth, and their sense of rightness calls upon them to specifically persecute the others, telling false stories about them, and inverting the truth to the extent that their sense of rightness has become inverted, since they can claim that rightness dictates that they persecute others. This is as in the verse, "Who invert the paths of rightness," Proverbs 2:13, which is why it is so difficult to find any sense of rightness in them. Section 3. Wherever the wrongs are greater, From there is rightness the furthest away, but nevertheless, it is easy to bring such people to know that they are acting wrongly. However, whoever deludes themselves and claims that everything they are doing is right, inverting wrong and murder to rightness, it is very difficult for such people to find any sense of rightness. Understand this well. For instance, one who is a thief or a robber, he too has some sense of rightness, only that his rightness is distant and rises only after he has committed many wrongs and robberies. But at least his wrong is evident for anyone to see. Everyone knows that he is a wrongdoer, and even he himself must acknowledge that he is not acting rightly. For how can he claim that stealing or robbing is right? However, one who is not a straightforward thief, but cheats and acts unethically in business dealings, even though his sense of rightness is nearby, for if the opportunity for outright theft would arise, he would refrain from doing it. It is difficult to talk him out of his own wrongdoing, because he deludes himself into believing that what he is doing is all right. And when the wrongdoing is even less, and one's sense of rightness is even nearer, then although this person is certainly better than the one who commits worse wrongdoing, and whose sense of rightness is further away, on the other hand, he is worse off because it is more difficult to talk him out of it, because his wrongdoing is subtle and he deludes himself into believing that he is not doing anything wrong. And so on. From level to level, the closer the level is to holiness, that subtle attachment of evil is more difficult to break because it is so easy to delude oneself between right and left, between wrongdoing and rightness. Section 4. As a general rule, on each and every level in each and every world, the holiness is covered by a shell, and even in the highest levels in which there is no real shell, some thin shell is still attached there. And the thinner the shell, and the more subtle the falsehood, the more difficult it is to be aware of it, and the more difficult it is to dissolve it. The ultimate roots of unjustness and rightness, which correspond respectively to the realm of holiness, which corresponds to rightness, to the right, and to the realm of evil, which corresponds to unjustness, to the left, are in faith and denials. The root of the realm of evil, which is the inclination for evil, is in denials. For the inclination for evil is called a foreign god, denials, as can be understood from the Rebbe in several places. Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 10, 62. But there are countless thousands and myriads of levels, for one may not completely deny, yet also not have full faith, and to that extent are the forces and realm of evil empowered. All this comes about because perceptions of godliness can only be attained through constrictions, from a higher intelligence to a lower intelligence, and in this way are all worlds, from beginning to end, brought into existence. These constrictions correspond to the totality of the Torah, for they correspond to the measures of the letters of the Torah, and through these letters of the Torah were all worlds created, as in, God looked into the Torah and created the world. Zohar, Part 1, 24a. Hence, the constrictions which are the wisdoms and intelligences through which we attain perceptions of godliness are the root of all worlds and everything in them. 4. You created them all with wisdom, Psalms 104:24, which is the wisdom, the intelligences, through which we are able to perceive God, which is the ultimate wisdom. But on account of Adam's sin, the intelligence and wisdom in all worlds and all levels were confounded, such that the realm of evil became attached to all intelligences in every world and level. This corresponds to what the Rebbe writes there in the lesson that sometimes the kingship, which is the lower wisdom, falls into the realm of evil. This is the most important toil and service for a human being to do throughout life, to sort out and cleanse every world and every level from the grip of the forces of evil that are in that world and level. This is relevant for every individual and at all times, for even the lowest of the lowest, to the extent of their service and good deeds sorts out and cleanses according to his level, and to that extent is able to attain a perception of godliness and to come to know him. But the opposite is also true, that if one acts inappropriately, To that extent does one create a veil separating him from perceptions of godliness. As written, "Your sins separate between you and your God." Isaiah 59, 2. That is why most people are distant from having a perception of godliness, because most of them do not act appropriately. The ultimate rectification for this is through the great, authentic tzaddik, who is at a very exalted level, who possesses the power to bring all the very distant ones close, to formulate and present to them fundamental holy concepts with holy intelligences, such that they too are able to attain perceptions of godliness. This is why one must cautiously avoid deluding oneself to follow someone who is not on a high level, even if that person is much more advanced than oneself. Because if that person has not yet attained a high level and is not yet able to break and ameliorate the attachment of all the forces of evil at their supernal root, which is the root of judgment, from which they receive their power, whoever has not yet reached this level, even if he has attained some level but is not yet able to break the force of evil of the higher level, this person can easily err to the extent of inverting injustice for decency, and is thus liable to cause great damage. This is because when one does not break the force of evil that one should break, one then empowers the realm of evil of the lower levels, and the evil of his followers may thereby be intensified, because their evil is nourished by the evil of the higher level, which is the level of their teacher, who is not yet able to sort out and subdue the realm of evil attached to his own level. But the greatest damage is when this teacher on a low level opposes the great, authentic teacher who is on a very exalted level of ultimate wholeness. For whoever is a follower of this authentic teacher, even if the follower is on a very low level, the teacher is able to rectify everything and to bring all distant ones close to God, imbuing them with perceptions of godliness through his great power, as explained in Likutey Halakhot, Part 2:7, that even after his departing, the tzaddik is involved in the rectification of the world through his followers, which is the ultimate wholeness of the tzaddik. So this teacher, who is on a low level when he does not receive power from the authentic tzaddik, and all the more so when he opposes him, not only is he unable to rectify his followers, but he also causes them great damage, for he uproots them from their true supernal root, which is the authentic tzaddik, who is the root of all Jewish souls. So this teacher on a low level is certainly unable to rectify his followers, but on the contrary, even empowers their evil from the root of evil that is attached to him, which he has not yet been able to break. This corresponds to the dispute of Korah and his followers, as in Korach he took himself to one side. Numbers 16:1. Targum meaning that he separated himself from the authentic tzaddik, who was Moses. But the verse can also be understood literally, that Korach took for himself some Jewish souls and claimed that he will lead them along his path, since he assumed himself to be at the highest level and thus sought to dispute Moses, who was the authentic tzaddik. He thus took souls by persuading them to become his followers and to follow him on the straight path to hell. We see this happening to those who follow the opposers and persecutors. Section 5. This corresponds to the prohibition of meat and milk, as in, do not cook a kid goat in its mother's milk. This is because everything in the world, mineral, plant, animal, the human being, all draw their nourishment from the constrictions through which we are able to perceive godliness, and all must go through a process of refinement after refinement. The ultimate refinement is accomplished by the authentic tzaddik, who is at an exalted level, and whoever is his follower and has become part of him is able to rectify and refine. For the ultimate refinement can only be accomplished by one who is able to ameliorate the root of judgment at its supernal root. For he has broken the entire power of the forces of evil at every level, up to the highest level. But whoever has still not reached this level is still unable to fully rectify the world, for which reason the exile is so long. For in each and every generation, things are sorted out according to the generation until the sorting out will be completed by the Messiah. Section 6. That is why we must refrain from eating from an animal that is still alive. During its lifetime, a living creature must receive vitality proportionately to its level, that is, the vitality relevant to a living creature, for it is unable to receive a higher vitality of a human being, for then it could no longer be an animal. But through this vitality relevant to its level, the animal cannot be sorted out and rectified, which can only be accomplished through ritual slaughter, which elevates the animal from living creature to human being, which elevates the vitality beyond that of an animal, at which point it can be rectified. This corresponds to sacrificial offerings, through which we elevate an animal to a human being. But the tzaddikim, as well as all Jewish people who follow them, also elevate from animal to human being through their eating. Section 7. This is because, on account of Adam's sin, death was decreed for posterity on humans, as well as on all living creatures. For, on account of his sin of eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, he caused a blemish in intelligence, causing great damage to intelligence, which is the intelligence to perceive God. As a result, it is impossible for a human being or any other living creature to be sorted out and to return to its source, which is wisdom, which is the root of everything, other than through death, for it is impossible for a human being or any living creature to be sorted out and rectified, other than by receiving a higher level of vitality that comes from a higher intelligence and wisdom, which cannot be attained while still in the body. This is because, while still in the body, one can only receive vitality from wisdom proportionately to one's level. But at the time of death, an extra spirit enters, as in, you increase their spirit and they die. Psalms 104:29. For a vitality coming from a higher wisdom descends at this time, on account of which the creature dies. For the body is unable to contain this higher vitality. This itself is how one is rectified to the extent one deserves through one's deeds. That is why the rectification of a human being both during one's lifetime and also after death is only through the very exalted tzaddik, who knows how to bring down perceptions of godliness even to the very lowly and spiritually ill. Everyone comes into this world only in order to be rectified and refined through good deeds. But most are unsuccessful in this and damage even more, on account of which they return countless times into many painful lifetimes. So the ultimate rectification is through the tzaddik, who knows the roots of all souls and knows how to interact with each individual during their lifetime and after death, how to rectify them and bring them to a perception of godliness, which is the ultimate purpose, the ultimate delight of the world of the future. That is why the most important thing is to become a follower of this tzaddik while one is still alive, for afterward it is very difficult to reach him. For the one who has toiled on the eve of Shabbat will have what to eat on Shabbat. Avodah Zarah 3a. This is why there are many who become followers, only to later fall away and leave, while others remain followers throughout most of their lives, only to fall away and leave in their old age, even becoming opposers. The most important thing is the end, the conclusion, as in, the conclusion of something is better than its beginning. Ecclesiastes 7:8, as our sages said regarding Elisha, who only fell away at the end of his life. Ecclesiastes Rabbah 7:16. This is because the older one becomes, the higher the intelligence that one should attain, as the Rebbe writes elsewhere, Likutey Halakhot, Part 2, 4. This corresponds to, the older that elder Torah sages become, the more their intelligence becomes integrated in them. Kinim 3:6. For the older one becomes, the closer one must come to one's root and rectification, which is the attainment of wisdom that becomes available at the time of one's departing, if one has earned it, which is the ultimate rectification. This is the ultimate. As long as one is alive, the battle with the inclination for evil is still being waged. For God created each thing and its opposite. So the greater the wisdom that one must attain, the more that the battle intensifies with Amalek, which embodies all of the forces of evil that constantly attack wisdom. Thus, sometimes a person may fall away in old age, as the Rebbe writes in the Aleph Beit Book Fall, 1 for one, is unable to contain the intelligence that is then available for them because one has not sanctified oneself properly for that level of intelligence. So the increased intelligence completely confuses the person, since a profusion of oil extinguishes the candle, which is why the older that ignorant people become, the more confused they become. Furthermore, the very title of a Torah scholar, the term means student of the sage, refers to one who is a follower of an authentic sage and tzaddik, for which reason he is called a student of the sage. A student of the sage, who is the authentic tzaddik. On the other hand, the definition of an ignorant person is one who has not served Torah scholars, as our sages said, Brachot 47b. For when one is not a follower of an authentic sage and tzaddik, one is in the category of an ignorant person. This is because one is unable to contain the wisdom, which is the perception of godliness, even if one is an erudite scholar oneself, and even if one has done good deeds, because the ultimate goal, which is a perception of godliness, can only be attained through the authentic tzaddikim and their followers and followers' followers. Section 8. This is, do not trust yourself until the day of your death. Avot 2:4. Specifically, yourself. That is, when one is by oneself, meaning when one sets oneself apart from the authentic tzaddik. In that case, one can certainly not trust that one will not fall, since one lacks any support. Thus, do not trust yourself until the day of your death, for it is impossible to become a follower of the authentic tzaddik and be nourished by him without complete self-surrender and sacrifice. We see for ourselves the great obstacles and tribulations that anyone seeking to approach the truth must endure up to the crushing of the soul, regarding which is said, "For we have been put to death for you every day, considered as sheep to be slaughtered." Psalms 44:23, as can be understood from the Rebbe's story, Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 152. Study there well. This then is, do not trust yourself until the day of your death, until one kills oneself for Torah study. As our sages said, the Torah only endures in the one who kills himself for it. Brachot 63b. In other words, one who breaks all obstacles and endures pain and self-sacrifice, literally giving one's life in order to become a follower of the authentic tzaddik and his holy Torah lessons. Only then is one assured from stumbling, for then one will remain firm no matter what one will have to endure, as written, even when you oppress us in a place of jackals. If we have forgotten the name of our God, God will certainly assess this, for he knows the secrets of the heart, for we have been put to death for you every day. Psalms 44:20-23. This is the Torah. When a person dies in a tent, Numbers 19:14, upon which our sages say, the Torah only endures in the one who kills himself for it, that one must kill oneself for the tent, which is to become a follower of the authentic tzaddik. Based on that, we can understand even more. Do not trust yourself until the day of your death, until you have become a person who dies in a tent, meaning to kill oneself and utterly sacrifice one's life to be in the tent of the authentic tzaddik and to become his follower. For then you will no longer be by yourself, for you will be bound and will have merged into the authentic tzaddik, at which point you are assured from stumbling. Study what is said there, and you will understand. Section 9. All human and non-human births come from these intelligences that the tzaddik evokes, giving birth to intelligences from a higher intelligence to a lower intelligence, to bring forth perceptions of godliness. through which come about the existence of the world and all physical births in the world. This is because birth comes from intelligence, for all births in the world are solely in order to manifest a perception of godliness in the world from generation to generation. For all of God's deeds are for His sake, Proverbs 16:4, and everything He created is for His glory, as our sages said, Yoma 38a. The very existence of the world is for His glory, so that we come to know Him, for everything that takes place or is born into the world is all for the authentic tzaddik. For the entire world was only created and is sustained solely for Him and for His company, as our sages said, Brachot 6b. Hence, all births comes from the constrictions and the intelligences. But because countering every constriction and intelligence is the force of evil of Amalek, this gives rise to birth pangs, as can be understood from what the Rebbe said at the end of Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 135, about cutting Amalek into four. This is why birth comes about mainly through loving kindness, Likutey Moharan, Part 2. 2. For through loving kindness, we are able to cut Amalek into four, which facilitates birth. This is because a great loving kindness arises after a birth, for through it will perceptions of godliness be even more manifested by the tzaddik, and through this loving kindness are the judgments that were attached to the constrictions ameliorated. Then, through the amelioration of the judgment, blood disintegrates and is transformed into milk, from which devolves the milk that forms after birth in living creatures. This milk is the food for the newborn and its sustenance during the early period of its life, for it is unable to eat other food that must be chewed and grinded with teeth. So God prepared mother's milk to nurse and sustain it during this time. Section 10. This corresponds to the prohibition of meat and milk. Meat can only be eaten after the soul has left the animal through ritual slaughter, since a limb detached from a living creature is forbidden to eat, for as long as the creature is still living, it cannot be rectified from Adam's sin. It is impossible to evoke upon it from the highest level as is needed for its rectification while it is still alive, and its rectification cannot come from the next higher level to it, since the rectification of the very damaged and blemished must come from the very highest level. This is included in what was stated earlier, that the lower the level that one is at, or the more ill that one is, the greater the teacher that one needs, who will know how to evoke upon that person a rectification from the highest level, evoking it upon him in an amazing way and with extremely deep intelligence, so that the individual will be able to contain it. That is why the rectification of any human being or animal can only be completed after death. For during their lifetime, they are unable to contain a rectification from such a high level as needed to complete the rectification, for the body is unable to contain an intelligence like this. Only after death can it be contained, if one has earned it. That is why we must not eat from any living creature, even after its death, other than through ritual slaughter. For slaughter with God's sword, which is the slaughter knife that has been properly checked to be whole, corresponds to the kingship, to the intelligence of the perceptions of godliness, as the Rebbe writes at the end of Likutey Moharan, Part 130. That is why the slaughter knife must be received from a Torah scholar, as our sages said, Chulin 17b. For this intelligence must be received specifically from an authentic sage. Thus, the 5 laws of ritual slaughter correspond to the 5 books of the Torah, which are the totality of the Torah, as written, "You shall slaughter as I have instructed you," Deuteronomy 12:21, which alludes to the entire Torah and commandments, which are included in, "as I have instructed you." In other words, the rectification of the slaughter is attained by evoking the rectification from the totality of the Torah that embodies all of these intelligences of perceptions of godliness, which are all included in the measures of the letters of the Torah, as stated there in the lesson. Specifically, through this is it possible to elevate the soul to its root and to rectify it properly, for it can only be rectified by evoking upon it a rectification from the very highest level, as said. Section 11. That is why we must not eat meat and milk together. Milk is permitted by the Torah while the animal is still alive. Bechorot 6b, for the milk is ameliorated during birth, in order to sustain the newborn during its early period. However, this vitality that is provided to the newborn during this period is not from a very high place that would be needed to complete its rectification, for it is unable to contain that during its life. Thus, it receives vitality appropriate for it to be sustained, so that it will be able to live all the time it will have to spend in this world, depending upon the sorting out that the tzaddik needs to accomplish through it. But then, after its soul leaves the body through ritual slaughter, a rectification from the very highest level is evoked upon it, to the extent needed to complete its rectification, and even after that, the meat still needs to be rectified by human consumption through properly reciting a blessing with devotion. The meat can also not be eaten without cooking on fire, which also comes from the kingship, which is the intelligence that is called the flame of a fire, as stated in the lesson. That is why Jewish foods must be cooked specifically over Jewish fire, and anything cooked by a non-Jew is forbidden to eat, for cooking is the completion of the rectification that makes the meat fitting to eat. This can only be done through the fire of someone from the holy Jewish people that comes from this intelligence that corresponds to a flame of a fire, as said. Section 12. So it is prohibited to cook meat with milk because the rectification of the meat can only be completed through the high level that is evoked through the authentic tzaddik upon all creatures when they die for the completion of their rectification. Whereas though milk is rectified and ameliorated while the animal is still alive, this is only within the context of the animal's earthly vitality for the purpose of its sustenance during its nursing period. Thus, when meat is mixed with milk in cooking, this causes very great damage because the meat now has to reach the completion of its rectification, which must be brought down from a very high level. So when it is mixed with milk, which corresponds to earthly life, the vitality of the animal during its infancy, which correspond to the immature mind of infancy, this arouses the worst in both. The meat cannot be sorted out and rectified by the sorting out of the milk, because the completion of the meat's rectification after the death of the animal must come from a very high place, and the milk cannot be rectified by the meat, because it is much too high for it. And when they are unable to be rectified by each other, this causes great upheaval, and the evil in the both of them that still needs to be rectified is aroused. For evil is most greatly aroused at the time of the completion of a rectification. That is why we must not mix meat and milk together, the main prohibition being during cooking, for that is the time of the completion of the rectification through the flame of a fire, which is the intelligence at which point there must not be any admixture, so that the completion of the meat's rectification through the highest level will not be spoiled by its being mixed with milk, the rectification of which comes from a lower level, thus causing damage to each other. Section 13. This is a literal correspondence to the damage caused to the lowly and blemished who come to be followers of a low-level teacher. Not only is this teacher unable to rectify them, but will also cause them much damage, for their evil will then intensify by drawing nourishment from the evil of this teacher who has not yet fully sorted out his own evil. Section 14. This is why the verse says, "Do not cook a kid goat in its mother's milk, even though it is also prohibited in any other's milk." The allusion here is that though milk is the vitality of the infant, as mother's milk sustains the infant, and it might seem proper that even in death the meat should be rectified by this milk, nevertheless, the Torah forbade this very severely, and in fact, this itself is the very cause for the prohibition. Since the milk sustains the newborn during infancy, as in mother's milk, therefore it is forbidden to mix it with meat during cooking, which is the completion of the meat's rectification. For it is impossible to rectify any creature through a lower level that corresponds to immature mind, which corresponds to mother's milk, for it will be thereby even more damaged. Section 15. The same applies to a human being, who cannot be rectified by someone at a low level, whose mind is an immature mind, corresponding to mother's milk. This is also alluded to in the commandment, "Do not cook a kid goat." One's good deeds are alluded to in the kid goat, as written about Isaac. "Bring me 2 good kid goats, and I will prepare them as delicacies for your father," as he likes Genesis 27:9, which alludes to the good deeds of the Jewish people. As stated in the Holy Zohar, "Make me delicacies as I like there," verse 4, from good deeds. Tikkuni Zohar 21:52a. Thus, do not cook a kid goat in its mother's milk, for cooking alludes to the completion of the rectification. So, in other words, you cannot complete the rectification of your good deeds with mother's milk, which corresponds to the mind and intelligence of a teacher on a low level. For not only will he not rectify you, but he will also cause you damage. This is, "The first fruit of your land shall you bring to God's temple." The human body is called land, as in, God formed the human being from earth, from the land, Genesis 2:7, and all of a person's good deeds correspond to first fruits. Thus, one must bring up to God the first fruits of one's land, which is one's body. For from everything that the body consumes and enjoys, the first fruits must be first brought to God. One must not eat before praying for one's body. Brachot 10b. And this, besides putting aside the actual first fruits and other priestly gifts, as well as charity for the needy and other rectifications of food, such as reciting the blessing before eating and the body enjoying it. All this is included in first fruits, which correspond to the totality of the Torah, as our sages said, "In the beginning, for the first fruit, which are called the beginning, and for the Torah, which is called the beginning." Genesis Rabbah 1:4, for it is all one, since the first fruits, which are called the beginning, correspond to the totality of the Torah and the commandments. This is because the sum total of the Torah is that one bring the first fruit of one's land and body to God, so that through that will one's body be sanctified, so that it will not derive any pleasure from this world that is not for God's sake. This is, "The first fruit of your land, which are a person's good deeds, shall you bring to God's temple, in which shines the light of the countenance that sustains the intelligence of perceptions, of godliness that are evoked by the authentic tzaddik." This is because even a person's good deeds require great rectification before they are worthy of ascending to God, so that through them one will be able to attain the hoped-for eternal goal of perceptions of godliness, which can only be attained through the authentic tzaddik, who is on a high level, who is able to evoke the vitality of the light of the countenance. As stated in the lesson, "So, the first fruit of your land, which are one's good deeds, shall you bring to God's temple to give them to the priest, who corresponds to the authentic tzaddik, for only he is able to rectify them." However, do not cook a kid goat in its mother's milk. Do not try to rectify your deeds with mother's milk, corresponding to someone on a low level, so that they do not cause them even greater damage, for the ultimate rectification comes through the light of the countenance that is evoked by the authentic tzaddik. This then is, "The first fruit shall you bring to God's temple." This is why, adjacent to this verse is, "3 times a year shall all your males be seen in the countenance of God." This corresponds to elevating the intelligence up to the light of the countenance, for which reason one must become a follower of the teacher who is on the highest level, which itself corresponds to, "The first fruit shall you bring to God's temple." Do not cook a kid goat in its mother's milk. So they are adjacent to each other, nearby forever, established in truth and uprightness. Psalms 111:8. Blessed be God forever. Amen and Amen. Study well the lesson in Likutey Moharan, Part 1:30, regarding the connection of all this. Section 16. This corresponds to our sages saying that the prohibition of meat and milk is a novelty, which means that the underlying reason for it is very novel. That reason is that the prohibition arises from the intelligence of the very great tzaddik, who himself is the greatest of novelties, an extremely amazing and awesome novelty. The ultimate rectification of all things, especially at the ultimate end, is through him, and the ultimate completion of rectification is after the soul leaves the body, when it is possible to properly receive a higher vitality through which one's rectification can be completed, which is the underlying cause for the prohibition of mixing meat and milk. Therefore, the mixing of meat and milk is a novelty, specifically a novelty. Section 17. This corresponds to Purim, which is the subdual of Haman Amalek. Amalek corresponds to the totality of the four kingdoms that counter intelligence, which is called a Dalet, as the Rebbe writes in the lesson. Sometimes the Dalet falls, which gives rise to the dominion of the four kingdoms, which are founded upon Amalek, paragraph 6. That is why Haman attacked specifically Mordecai, who was the authentic tzaddik, who was on a very high level, seeking to uproot and annihilate him, through which he sought to uproot the entire Jewish people as well, who are dependent upon him. So he boasted about his wealth, as written. Haman told to them of the glory of his wealth and his many sons. Esther 5:11. And similarly, Ahasuerus made a banquet in which he showed off his great wealth and the glory of his kingdom. For wealth and money are the opposite of this exalted intelligence. As stated in the lesson paragraph 4, for it is impossible to attain this intelligence other than by despising greed. But God confounded their schemes and upended their plans through the great power of Mordecai, the authentic tzaddik, who devoted himself to prayer, crying out loudly and bitterly, urging the Jewish people in every city and town to also cry out and pray to God. Mordecai also studied much Torah with the Jewish people, as our sages tell us about his teachings, Menachot 65a, since he knew how to rebuke the Jewish people appropriately for the audacity and Torah of each individual, as he did in prayer as well. See there in the lesson. Through this, loving kindness was manifested, as in, a thread of loving kindness was spread over Esther, Megillah 13a, through which Mordecai severed the Dalet, the kingship, the intelligence, from them, as in, he severed the Dalet, through which he subdued Haman Amalek to the ground and repaid him in kind. Section 18. This is why Haman prepared a tree 50 cubits high. Haman Amalek embodies all the 50 gates of defilement, so the only one who can stand up against him is one who has the power to evoke perceptions of godliness from the 50th gate of holiness. So Haman assumed that there is no one who will be able to stand up against him, since he is able to cast a blemish all the way on high, since he draws nourishment from the 50th gate of defilement. He thus prepared a tree 50 cubits high, using deep magic to intensify all of the 50 gates of defilement. But Mordecai was on a very exalted level, that of the very great tzaddik, who is able to bring perceptions of godliness even into the very fallen, for he knows how to evoke the intelligence of perceptions of godliness from the 50th gate of holiness. From there came the great miracle of Purim, when the Jewish people brought about the downfall of Haman and evoked this great miracle for posterity, for every generation, through which the holiness of Purim can be attained in every generation and in every year, evoking upon ourselves the holiness of this great tzaddik who corresponds to Mordecai, whose illumination is very great. As stated in the writings of the Ari, so great is this illumination that it is inaccessible even on Shabbat and festivals. So extremely powerful is this illumination that it can shine even into the depth of earthly affairs, even into mundane doings, even into the 39 creative acts. That is why work is permitted on Purim, for the illumination of Mordecai, which is the holiness of Purim, which corresponds to the illumination of the great tzaddik, can shine even into the depth of earthly affairs. Even if one has fallen greatly, even if one is extremely spiritually ill, for the great depth of his wisdom can shine perceptions of godliness even into this person. Section 19. This corresponds to the great joy of Purim, on which we rejoice more than on any festival. As our sages instructed us, a person must drink on Purim until he can no longer discern between "Cursed be Haman" and "Blessed be Mordecai," Megillah 7b. As explained in the lesson, we must sustain the intelligence through the joy of the festivals, which corresponds to the light of the countenance, and the essence of the joy of the festivals, which is the light of the countenance, can be attained only in the temple by making pilgrimage to there. But now, due to our many sins, the temple has been destroyed, and all our joy is mixed with tears. So in His compassion, God sent us the balm before the wound by giving us these days of Purim that precede the 3 festivals that begin with Pesach. Purim is the preparation for Pesach, as the Rebbe writes elsewhere, Likutey Halakhot Part 2, 74, meaning that through the holiness of Purim, we evoke upon ourselves the illumination of the great tzaddik, which corresponds to the illumination of Mordecai, through which we are able to heal even the most spiritually ill person. The ultimate healing comes through joy, as stated in the story of the 6th day, in which the healing of the princess, who represents the totality of all Jewish souls, who correspond to the innermost part of a princess. Their healing is through joy. For this tzaddik is able to evoke such a great illumination, through which he is able to bring joy even to the most ill, through the amazing revelations of his holy Torah. Furthermore, joy is the ultimate vitality through which the intelligence of perceptions of godliness is sustained. This corresponds to the obligation to drink and rejoice on Purim until one can no longer discern between "Cursed be Haman" and "Blessed be Mordecai." This means that through the intense joy, one rises beyond intelligence, up to the ultimate root of the highest holiness, a place to which evil has no attachment at all. For there one can say neither "Cursed be Haman" nor "Blessed be Mordecai." Anywhere else to which evil has some attachment, even if this is at an exalted level, there is still some subtle attachment of evil, however slight it may be. One can say there "Cursed be Haman," which would be that subtle attachment of evil at that level, and "Blessed be Mordecai," which is the true essence of the holiness. But Mordecai, corresponding to the tzaddik, transcends it all and is able to completely and utterly nullify the attachment of evil, such that he reaches a place in which evil has not the slightest attachment at all, and is able to evoke this illumination into the world for all generations. This is the illumination of Purim, when we must drink and rejoice until we ascend to this level at which neither "Cursed be Haman" nor "Blessed be Mordecai" can be said, which is the source from which the joy of Purim arises. Through this intense joy that comes from there, we are able to rejoice even today in this bitter exile, both the collective exile and the individual exile, the exile of each individual's soul. As a result of this great illumination, we are able to rejoice all souls, even in this intense exile, for the great tzaddik, with his very deep and exalted wisdom, evokes joy even upon these souls. This is the ultimate vitality of the intelligence, through which he evokes perceptions of godliness. And through the joy that is evoked on Purim, through this great illumination, we are able to evoke joy into all of the festivals, such that we are able to sense the joy of the festivals even today, when we lack the temple. This is why Purim is a preparation for Pesach, which is the first of the 3 festivals. Section 20. This is why Purim is alluded to in the Torah section that speaks of the 3 festivals. 7 days shall you eat matzah, Exodus 23:15, as the Rebbe writes, Likutey Halakhot, Part 2, 74, in which the verse also says, 3 times a year shall all your males appear before the countenance of God. For through the holiness of Purim, we are able to evoke the light of the countenance that was in the temple even today, after its destruction. That is why, adjacent to this, the verse says, "the first fruits of your land, for it is all one above," paragraph 15. Section 21. This corresponds to the 4 sections. The section of shkalim, which is the donation toward the sanctuary, corresponding to donation to loving kindness, through which we are able to sever the kingship and elevate it to the light of the countenance that shines in the sanctuary, which corresponds to the temple. Then we read the section of Zakor, which is the eradication of Amalek, which is the totality of the 4 kingdoms. For through the above loving kindness, which corresponds to the charity of donations toward the sanctuary, we thereby sever the kingship of holiness so that Amalek can no longer draw nourishment from it, as in Samuel beheaded Agag, as the Rebbe writes, through which the downfall of Amalek is brought about. That is why we read the section of Zakor after the section of Shkalim, and the prophet reading is the section containing Samuel beheaded Agag, which is the downfall of Amalek. Then comes Purim, which is the eradication of Amalek, as our sages said, from Samuel until Mordecai. Midrash Tanchuma, Teitzei 11, and on Purim shines an amazing illumination, the illumination of the great tzaddik, who is able to shine even into the greatly fallen and the most seriously ill. Section 22. After that, we read the section of the red heifer that purifies from defilement to the dead, so that we will be pure to make the Pesach, which is the totality of the 3 festivals, for Pesach is the first of the festivals. After we have subdued the evil power of Amalek and severed the kingship dominion from them, we must then evoke purity upon all the souls to which the defilement of Amalek, which is defilement to the dead, has become attached. That is the red heifer that purifies from defilement to the dead that had come upon the people as a result of the sin of the golden calf, for which reason we need the red heifer. As our sages said, "Let the mother come and clean up for the child." Midrash Tanchuma, Chukat 8. This is because the sin of the golden calf was essentially caused by the people having blemished in the honor of Moses and his disciples, by their not having faith that even after the perceived departing of Moses, who corresponds to the authentic tzaddik, his words will nevertheless endure forever, and we must follow his teachings forever. For his words are the words of the living God that endure forever, as written, "The word of our God will endure forever." Isaiah 48. So the core blemish of the golden calf was the people's acting upon their belief that Moses had died, as Rashi comments on the verse. The people saw that Moses was tarrying, Exodus 32, 1, after which they turned to Aaron and said, "Make for us a god who will go before us, for we don't know what is with this man Moses." In other words, they acted as if they were not opposing Moses personally, but only saying that since they do not know what is with him, therefore, now that he has anyway died, they feel a replacement should be sought. These confused and errant ideas came from the council of the leaders of the mixed multitude, whom the people took as their new leaders. Since they were able to perform wonders through black magic, it was Eunice and Umbris who cast a written formula into the molten gold, which produced the golden calf, as our sages said, Midrash Tanchuma, Tissa 19. The main sin and error was that they did not accept that Moses' Torah that they had just recently received was pure and clear truth, with Moses' holy disciples still among them, Aaron, Hur, Joshua, and so forth. But even according to their mistaken assumption that Moses had died, they should have followed his holy disciples and asked of them the path to follow. But the leaders of the mixed multitude tricked them into despising Moses' Torah, in which is explicitly written, "You shall not have any foreign gods." So they decided to follow their advice and make the golden calf, not wanting to follow the advice of Moses' disciples, who protested, even killing her. Thus, fearing for his own life, Aaron unwillingly carried out their demands so that they not kill him, which would have sealed their doom forever, Sanhedrin 7a. But the red heifer purifies from this. The heifer is a very deep, deep thing, regarding which is written, I said I would become wise, but it is beyond me. Ecclesiastes 7:23. Through the procedure of the heifer, we evoke the very deep and exalted intelligence of the authentic tzaddik, who is on a very great level, who corresponds to Moses, through which we are able to heal the most ill and lowly, even those who have fallen into the realm of death. The red heifer corresponds to the intensity of the totality of all judgments, which correspond to the ultimate constrictions from which all judgments draw their power. All judgments are God's constricting of His light, and are all for the good, in order to manifest and shine His great light, which is the perception of godliness. Specifically in this way, for without constrictions it would be impossible to contain on account of the abundance of light. As the Rebbe writes at the beginning of the lesson, perceptions of godliness cannot be contained without constrictions. However, wherever there is a constriction, judgment has sway. And it is from these judgments that the power of the forces of evil devolve, all for the purpose of free choice. For God constricted His light so that human beings would have free choice. The righteous will follow them, but sinners will stumble in them. Hosea 14:10. The righteous who break their lusts and neutralize the forces of evil that arise from the constrictions are able to perceive the pathways of the constrictions, such that specifically through them are they able to attain perceptions of godliness, to the extent that they are able to bring perceptions of godliness even into the very lowly. On the other hand, the wicked, by not breaking their lusts and not humbling themselves before the great tzaddikim, thereby stumble on account of the influence of the forces of evil that are attached to the constrictions, such that the light is hidden and concealed from them. That is why, after the Israelites had stumbled so greatly, so shortly after receiving the Torah, with thunder and lightning and such awesome wonders, all on account of the great power of free choice, as explained in Laws of Blessings of Fragrance 4:33, God then had compassion on His people and taught Moses about the construction of the sanctuary, which corresponds to the temple, which corresponds to the totality of all holy constrictions through which it is possible to perceive godliness. The entire structure of the sanctuary, its beams, bolts, pillars, curtains, and so forth, and all the holy articles, such as the ark, the table, the candelabra, and so forth, with all their details, are all holy and awesome, constrictions through which to attain perceptions of godliness. For the ultimate vitality of the intelligence, through which we perceive godliness, is through the light of the countenance that shines in the temple, which corresponds to the sanctuary, as said in the lesson. That is why God instructed that each individual should give of the benevolence of their heart toward the construction of the sanctuary. For the benevolence of the heart corresponds to charity and loving kindness, through which we are able to sever the kingship, which is the intelligence, and to elevate it up to the light of the countenance that shines in the temple, which corresponds to the sanctuary. Section 23. The ultimate rectification in the temple and the sanctuary was brought about through the procedures of the sacrificial offerings that atone for all sins. If a person sinned, they would bring an animal for an offering, for, on account of the sin, the intelligence of the perception of godliness departed from them, and a separating veil was created between the individual and the perception of godliness. As written, "Your sins have separated between you and your God." Isaiah 59:2. Then one must bring an animal to the priest to offer it as a sacrifice after it was ritually slaughtered for that purpose. For the priest receives his power from Moses, who anointed Aaron and his sons, who embodied the holiness of all priests who would descend from them, such that through the power of Moses they were able to offer the animal as a sacrifice, thereby evoking an amazing intelligence through the light of the countenance that shines in the temple and the sanctuary, in which all offerings were brought. Through the awesome illumination of this intelligence, even the vitality of the animal would ascend on high, such that through this would healing and forgiveness be evoked for for the sinner. This is because the sinner's ultimate rectification comes through a very exalted intelligence. Through the power of the authentic tzaddik, through this intelligence will the vitality, sparks, and human reincarnations that were embodied in the spirit of animality also have an ascent and rectification. The great tzaddik is able to heal and rectify everything with his great intelligence, and through this is the sinner who has brought an offering rectified, for his ultimate rectification comes through the power of the great tzaddik that is evoked through the offering. Section 24. The red heifer is a very amazing novelty. Its entire procedure is done outside the temple, unlike all other offerings that are brought inside the temple, in which the light of the countenance shines, through which the rectification is attained. The heifer, though, is done outside while only looking from afar toward the temple. It is slaughtered directly opposite the temple entrance, for through the procedure of the red heifer, we evoke a very, very exalted and deep intelligence that is beyond comprehension, through which we are able to rectify and purify even from defilement to the dead, which is the progenitor of all defilement. The original decree of death was for this very reason, because on account of Adam's sin, it is impossible to attain complete perception of godliness during one's lifetime, as spoken of earlier. So the human being must die, at which time a great light that could not be contained during one's lifetime while still in the body comes to the individual. And when the soul exits and leaves the body behind, the realm of defilement seizes onto it, and its rectification is through burial in the earth. When it returns to the ultimate, very material constriction, the materiality of the earth in which the body's filth decomposes, while the soul ascends on high, if one is deserving, based upon one's deed in this world. After that, the body must wait, lying and decomposing in the earth until the resurrection of the dead, when the completion of each individual's rectification will come about. During all this time, from the day of one's death until the resurrection, the soul is being refined to the extent of its deeds, ascending as high as it is able to receive from there a rectification. In other words, so that an illumination of the intelligence will come upon it, so that it will be able to enlighten even the body with perceptions of godliness after the resurrection. For the ultimate rectification is to perceive and know godliness. That is why the ultimate hope and rectification of every individual is through the authentic and very great tzaddik, to whom one was privileged to follow during one's lifetime. For afterward it is extremely difficult to come close to him, as the Rebbe said, Likutey Moharan, Part 2, 78. Section 25. This corresponds to what is written in the section of the heifer. This is the Torah when a person dies in a tent, Numbers 19:14, upon which our sages comment, the Torah endures only in the one who kills himself over it. Brachot 63b. When a person dies in a tent, specifically in a tent, which corresponds to killing oneself and surrendering one's entire life to be able to remain in the tent of Torah, which is the tent of the authentic tzaddik, as in Joshua, son of Nun. A youth did not leave the tent. Exodus 33:11. That is why all of the followers of the authentic tzaddik are called tent dwellers, as in Jacob was a simple person, a tent dweller. Genesis 25:27, upon which our sages comment, in the tent of Shem and Ever, Genesis Rabbah 63:10, who were the authentic tzaddikim of that time. Another verse says, a sound of song and salvation in the tent of the righteous, Psalms 118:15, which is telling us that in the future, the entire Jewish people will sit in the tents of the authentic tzaddikim and follow them. As written, I will yet settle you in tents, as in times of old, Hosea 12:10, as Rashi explains this there, as referring to the times of Jacob, the tent dweller. This corresponds to when a person dies in a tent, the ultimate human rectification, the ultimate endurance of the Torah, is when one kills oneself for the sake of the tent, in order to become a follower of the authentic tzaddik, which corresponds to being a tent dweller. This itself is the essence of the procedure of the red heifer, which is the totality of all constrictions which correspond to the intense redness of judgments. It is entirely done on the outside, for the rectification it achieves is ultimately brought about specifically by Moses, for all heifers had to be sanctified by the ashes of Moses' original heifer. This is because the procedure of the heifer is to evoke a great and deep intelligence in order to purify from defilement to the dead, meaning to purify those who have fallen deeply into the realm of death, which can only be attained through the great power of Moses, who represents the great tzaddik on an exalted level, who has the power to purify the greatly fallen when they hold firmly and sincerely onto him with self-surrender, bringing perceptions of godliness even into them, which is their ultimate hope and rectification, as said. Section 26. After this comes the section of the month, the sanctification of the month, which is the rectification and filling of the blemish of the moon, such that the light of the moon will be as the light of the sun. The sun and the moon correspond to higher intelligence and lower intelligence, but on account of the blemishing of the moon, the corresponding intelligence was blemished, such that we are unable to attain perceptions of godliness. This is the cause of all blemishes. But through the sanctification of the month, we rectify this and fill the blemish of the moon, so that the moon, which corresponds to the lower wisdom, to the kingship, to the lower intelligence, will be whole, so that we will be able to thereby contain and perceive the light of the supernal intelligence in order to perceive godliness, which corresponds to the light of the sun. Then everything will be rectified, and the light of the moon will be as the light of the sun. Isaiah 30:26. And the earth will be filled with knowledge to know God. Isaiah 11:9. That is why we read all this before Pesach, which is the beginning and totality of all the festivals, which are a commemoration for the exodus from Egypt that took place on Pesach, so that through all of these rectifications, we will be able to contain the light of the countenance that shines during the three festivals, through which the kingship, the lower intelligence, is sustained, so that we are able to perceive godliness. Then, as during the times of your leaving the land of Egypt, I will show you wonders. Micah 7:15. This means that just as at the exodus from Egypt, through the power of Moses, we were able to take leave of all of the gates of defilement and enter into all of the gates of holiness, such that we were able to attain perceptions of godliness at Torah giving, so will we be able, even now, in this intense exile, to take leave of all types of defilement and ascend to all types of holiness, such that we will attain perceptions of godliness through the great power of the great and exalted. Authentic Tzaddikim. Section 27. This corresponds to the cedarwood, hyssop, and strand of crimson-dyed wool that were cast into the fire that burnt the heifer, Numbers 19:6. Cedarwood and hyssop correspond to higher intelligence and lower intelligence, for a cedar is the tallest of trees, which corresponds to a higher intelligence, which corresponds to the perception of the great tzaddik. Furthermore, the tzaddik is called a cedar, as in, a tzaddik will blossom as a palm tree, grow tall as a cedar in Lebanon. Psalms 92:13. Hyssop, on the other hand, is very short, which corresponds to the very lowly ones, for whom the tzaddik, with the great depth of his great wisdom, constricts his intelligence from a higher intelligence to a lower intelligence, until he is able to bring perceptions of godliness even into them, which is the ultimate purpose of authentic living, the eternal life of the world of the future, and the resurrection, from where the purification from the realm of death is drawn. The strand of crimson-dyed wool binds the cedarwood with the hyssop, as our sages said, Parah 3:11, which corresponds to holy audacity, through which we are able to attain Torah and prayer, each individual, to the extent of their holy audacity, so will they attain Torah, and the same for prayer, as explained well at the end of the lesson. Study there well, and you will understand well the connecting dots in the lesson. It is explained there that the ultimate rectification of intelligence, which corresponds to the kingship through which we attain perceptions of godliness, is mainly through loving kindness, through which we are able to sever the kingship from the realm of evil, from the four evil kingdoms, from Amalek. This loving kindness is attained through rebuke, as in, she opened her mouth with wisdom, and a Torah of loving kindness was on her tongue. Proverbs 31:26. This rebuke reflects the audacity that the tzaddik perceives in each individual, whether it is holy or otherwise, in line with which will be that individual's Torah and prayer. Through this rebuke is the loving kindness manifested, through which we are able to sever the dalet, which corresponds to the intelligence, from the realm of evil, and elevate it up to the light of the countenance that shines into the three festivals, through which even the lowliest are able to attain perceptions of godliness. Study there and understand. Hence, the ultimate rectification and repentance of each individual who must receive rebuke from the authentic tzaddik in order to return to Torah and prayer is through holy audacity, through which the rectification of Torah and prayer is achieved, through which the authentic tzaddik rebukes him. We must accept the rebuke and return to God, strengthening ourselves in holy audacity and not being embarrassed before the mockers, as stated at the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch, regarding which the Tur cites. Be audacious as a leopard. Avot 5:20, Orach Chaim 1. This holy audacity is the first step of Jewishness, especially in our generations. As our sages said, why was the Torah given to the Jewish people? Because they are audacious, Beitzah 25b. Through this, we are able to attain Torah and prayer. Hence, when one accepts this rebuke, loving kindness is thereby manifested, through which we sever the dalet from the realm of evil and attain perceptions of godliness, and thus the ultimate rectification of the intelligence, so that even the very lowly ones will be able to attain perceptions of godliness, is only through holy audacity. This is the strand of crimson-dyed wool that binds the cedar wood with the hyssop, which corresponds to the binding of the higher intelligence with the lower intelligence, through which it is possible to bring perceptions of godliness even into the very lowly. This is because the Hebrew term for strand of crimson-dyed wool corresponds to the holy audacity of the holy, upright, and sincere Jewish people who are very lowly and scorned in their own eyes. Literally as a worm, as in, I am a worm and not a human being. Psalms 22:7. Nevertheless, they are audacious and very firm in their beliefs against the opposers and mockers, for God and the authentic tzaddikim strengthen them greatly with holy audacity, as in, do not fear, worm of Jacob. I have made you as a newly grooved threshing sledge with sharp teeth. You shall thresh the mountains and grind them, and make the hills into chaff. Isaiah 41:14-15. Our ultimate strength now, in this bitter exile from all sides, is to be as a worm. Just as a worm's only power is in its mouth, so is the Jewish people's only power in their mouths. Midrash Tehillim 22, which is our ultimate support and hope. The strand of crimson-dyed wool thus corresponds to the speech of the mouth, which is the strength and audacity of the upright Jewish people, as in, your lips are as a thread of crimson. Song of Songs 4:3. For the ultimate audacity is in speech, in that we must know how to respond to the heretics, opposers, and mockers with holy audacity, as in, know what to answer. Avot 2:14. Without feeling submissive to them, and without being embarrassed before them at all. To that extent will we attain Torah and prayer, which are dependent upon the speech of the mouth. Torah is dependent upon the mouth, as written, "The words of Torah are life to those who express them with their mouths." Proverbs 4:22. Eruvin 54a. And prayer is specifically with the mouth, as in, "O God, open my mouth." Psalms 51:17. There, in speech, is the essence of holy audacity, as in, "They will tell of the audaciousness of your awesomeness, and they will speak of your might." Psalms 145:6 and 11. This is the strand of crimson, as in, "Your lips are as a thread of crimson." This corresponds to, "She does not fear for her household from snow, for her entire household is clothed in crimson." Proverbs 31:21, which is speaking in praise of the Torah. All praises referred to as garments. As the next verse there says, "She makes bed covers by herself," on account of which her husband is known in the gates. She makes a bedsheet and sells it, a sash to give to the merchant. Her garment is audacious and beautiful. Hence, the thread of crimson that corresponds to garments, for the garments are made from it, corresponds to holy audacity of the Torah, as in, "Her garment is audacious and beautiful, through which we attain perceptions of godliness." For the ultimate perception of godliness is through garments. That is the essence of the deep skill and wisdom of the very great authentic tzaddik, who knows how to clothe his exalted wisdom in many garments, so that he is able to bring it down and present it to the very lowly, such that they too will attain perceptions of godliness. This is, "Her husband is known in the gates," which refers to the perceptions of godliness, regarding which is said, "Her husband is known in the gates," each individual to their ability to sense in their heart, as stated in the Holy Zohar Part 1, 103b, which corresponds to perceptions of godliness, which cannot be spoken about at all, but each individual must sense in their heart. This is attained through the authentic tzaddik, when one becomes his follower, which is achieved mainly through holy audacity, as said. That is why the verse there says immediately after this, "She opened her mouth with wisdom, and a Torah of loving kindness on her tongue," which refers to the manifestation of loving kindness from within rebuke, which is to the extent of the holy audacity that the tzaddik sees in each individual. This is juxtaposed to, "Her garment is audacious and beautiful," for the essence of rebuke is regarding holy audacity, upon which the entire Torah and prayer are dependent, through which one attains loving kindness, which corresponds to a Torah of loving kindness on her tongue, through which one attains intelligence, as said, through which even the very lowly are able to reach perceptions of godliness. Thus, the strand of crimson corresponds to holy audacity that binds and ties the cedar wood to the hyssop, which correspond to the higher intelligence with the lower intelligence, through which perceptions of godliness can be brought even to the very lowly. All this is cast into the burning of the red heifer, which is burnt in fire, a flame of fire, which corresponds to the holy constriction of the intelligence, as written at the beginning of the lesson. Section 28. This corresponds to the slaughter, burning, and gathering of the ashes spoken of regarding the heifer. Through all of these, we are able to sever the dalet, the kingship, from the realm of evil, and to elevate it to the light of the countenance of the three festivals, which correspond to the above three rectifications: slaughter, burning, gathering, which parallel the three festivals. Slaughter corresponds to Pesach, when we slaughter the Pesach sacrifice, as written, "The entire congregation of Israel shall slaughter it." Exodus 12:6. Burning in fire corresponds to Shavuot, as in, "We heard his words from within the fire." Deuteronomy 4:36, which was at Torah giving on Shavuot, which is the ultimate perception of godliness. That is why the entire rectification of the heifer was done in fire, burning it in fire until it became ashes, for the ultimate rectification is through fire, as in, "An angel of God appeared to Moses in a flame of fire." Exodus 3:2. Gathering corresponds to Sukkot, which is called the Festival of Gathering. Exodus 34:22. For the ultimate purity from the realm of death is by elevating the dalet from the realm of evil and enlivening it through the light of the countenance that shines during the 3 festivals, through which we attain perceptions of godliness. Section 29. This corresponds to what our sages say on what is said about King David, the delicate one of the cedar. When he studied Torah, he made himself as delicate as a worm, while when he went out to battle, he was as firm as wood. 2 Samuel 23:8. Rashi, Moed Katan, 16b, Tana Devei, Eliyahu Rabbah, 3. So his holy audacity was as a worm, in that he was lowly in his own eyes as a worm, yet he was very strong in battle with holy audacity against the opposers, so that his brazenness would counter theirs. As already explained elsewhere, Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 22, holy audacity, comes from embarrassment, which corresponds to the worm of crimson, which corresponds to holy audacity, as said, for specifically by being lowly in his own eyes, scorned literally as a worm, as in, I am a worm and not a human being ashamed of his own improper behavior, specifically through that he was audacious as a leopard, with holy audacity against those who sought to prevent him from the truth. This is the delicate one of the cedar. Related to earlier. Regarding what was said on the verse, she does not fear for her household from snow, for her entire household is clothed in crimson, as speaking about holy audacity. Elsewhere, we have spoken of our sages' teaching on this verse, do not read crimson, but 2, for the entire Torah is clothed in doubles. Give Deuteronomy 15, 8, 10, 11, 14, all of which spare a person from the snow of hell, Tanchuma, Ray, 13. This corresponds to holy audacity and stubbornness, as the Rebbe urges us to be very stubborn in the service of God, Likutey Moharan, Part 2, 48. This idea of stubbornness is an amazing source of strength so that one never fall under any circumstances, as I heard from many upright people who claim that this is their main source of strength. This corresponds to her entire household is clothed with crimson too, as in give. The entire Torah is dependent upon this strengthening oneself to repeat and repeat every single good deed or Torah study that one has begun to train oneself in. One must repeatedly strengthen oneself to repeat the same holy act even 1,000 times, no matter what one is enduring. For the endurance of the Torah is dependent upon being very stubborn in the service of God, repeating a holy act stubbornly thousands of times, and ignoring any despair that the forces of evil or the mockers raise to one's mind, but to simply continue repeating the same holy act even thousands of times, as in, her entire household is clothed with 2 give. And that is not only referring to charity, but comes to teach us a rule for the entire Torah, that one must repeat holy acts many times. 2, as the minimum of multiplicity, is just the way of saying a lot, even innumerable times, as our sages in fact say on that verse. Give even 1,000 times. Sifri, Rai, 64. But the same is true of the entire Torah. This is the ultimate source of strength. This is, she does not fear for her household from snow, referring to the hell of snow. There is a hell of fire and a hell of snow. Midrash Tanchuma, Rai, 13. The hell of fire is caused by one's having become heated to sin, whereas the hell of snow is caused by one's cold response after the sin to an arousal for repentance. Everyone is filled with regrets. Eruvin, 19b. Nedarim, 9b. But one usually does not repent because one is discouraged, assuming that repentance will no longer help on account of one's very great sins. This is especially true of those who have begun to become aroused from their sleep and to return to God, devoting themselves to Torah and the commandments for some time. But then, they fall away because they realize that despite having studied Torah and fulfilled many commandments, the inclination for evil nevertheless overcame them, as each individual knows within themselves. Whoever remains with this sentiment and allows themselves to fall on account of the seductive ideas of the realm of evil will be sentenced to the hell of snow, which is extremely cold and bitter. This is as measure for measure, since one became cold with discouragement, one is therefore sentenced to the coldness of the snow of hell. This corresponds to our sages' teaching that some are sentenced to a hell that is half fire and half snow. This means that they are sentenced to the hell of fire for heating themselves to sin, and to the hell of snow and coldness for having become cold with discouragement and not making the effort to repent. Now the verse is well constructed. She does not fear for her household from snow. This corresponds to coldness, for her entire household is clothed in crimson. This corresponds to 2, as in give, even 1,000 times, which is true for all Torah and commandments. This refers to making the effort through great stubbornness, never giving up, but redoubling one's efforts to fulfill again and again, whether in Torah study or the commandments. Whatever one is able to grab in this passing shadow of one's life, no matter what one will have to endure. Through this, she does not fear for her household from snow, which is coldness, and since one did not allow oneself to become cold toward the Torah and commandments on account of discouragement and cold apathy that the forces of evil cast into one's mind, but rather consistently seized onto whatever good one could, and then again and again, as in, for her entire household is clothed in crimson too. That is why, certainly, she does not fear for her household from snow. This is what is stated in the consolations of the prophet Isaiah, in which he fervently encourages the people to come close to God even after all that they had done. God desires for the sake of his righteousness. So he increased and enhanced the Torah, Isaiah 42:21. This means that God increased the Torah and commandments that he gave to the Jewish people, as our sages said on this verse Makot 23b, in order to provide them with eternal merit, so that each individual, however they are, will be able to always seize some good deed of Torah or commandments. See Laws of Fish. 4. It is a plundered and trampled people. The prophet continues in the following verse, then later encourages the people by saying, "When you pass through water, I am with you. When you walk into fire, you shall not be burnt." Isaiah 43:2. This means that they will be spared from the hells of fire and water, which are heat and cold, all through the encouragement alluded to in the verse. God desires for the sake of his righteousness, so he increased and enhanced the Torah. This is why, do not believe in yourself till the day of your death. Avot 2:4. When one reaches a level at which one will be rectified by the authentic tzaddik who is able to elevate them, the evil of that level rises up against them with very great confusions in order to uproot them from life. Thus, do not believe in yourself, specifically in yourself. For when one is by oneself, meaning that one opposes the authentic tzaddik, then one certainly should not believe in oneself, for one will fall without support. However, the one who holds on to the authentic tzaddik is assured from stumbling and falling, for the teachings of the authentic tzaddik will guide them in this world, in the grave, and at the time of resurrection for eternity, as in, when you walk, it will guide you. Proverbs 6:22, Avot 6:10. During one's lifetime, one must sort out all levels, progressing from level to level until one reaches a level that one cannot attain in the body. But only the very rare great ones on exalted levels are able to reach this. Yet through their power, there is hope that even those who are not able to attain this and are very distant from it will be able to, mainly by being strong in faith in God and in the very great authentic tzaddikim, surrendering one's entire heart and soul to them. Those tzaddikim are able to elevate one to one's root, to the place from where one has come. This is the essence of the battle with Amalek in every generation, For Amalek attacks at every level, from which arise all the disputes in each generation, when falsehood attacks the truth, regarding which is said, "A wicked one waits in watch for a righteous one. But God will not abandon him in his hand." Psalms 37, 32 through 33.